because the defense doesn't have to say. It's kind of during the prosecution's side. We every day we kind of have a much better idea of like what was coming.
Right.
But my sense of it, from what Rebecca said, is we're going to see a lot more of what we saw yesterday.
Yeah.
As Jen said, a lot of excuses, not a lot of explanations.
That's what Jen hit the nail on the head, and that's what any trial
not
lawyer
that
will tell
there
you.
is ever an explanation.
No,
for
but
this.
if in this position where you're seeking mitigation,
right.
There are 12 people who are the gatekeepers of your fate. That's it.
Right.
And it is important how you present this.
There he is.
And at some point, you've got to consider, is this just getting worse?
Right.
And I
was kind of irritated by the end of the day, and I wonder how the jury felt. I was kind of like,
I'll tell you, the pennies guy, that was a bad move. I mean, there's just...
You thought that was ridiculous?
It was beyond the pale. I mean, there's no planet in the solar system where we've been a part of a litigation team that said, you know what, let's put a guy on.
All right, let's go.
All right, well, I think we're getting underway. You can take our mics off.
Everyone might be seated. Good morning. We are ready to proceed, ladies and gentlemen. This witness has been sworn to testify truthfully. Okay, Mr. Goebel.
Yes, John. Good morning, Kristen.
Good morning.
Being here.
Good morning.
Let me just start by asking you, how do you know Tanner Moore?
He was in my 5th grade class. I don't know exactly how many years ago, but he was a student of mine.
Okay.
Can the members of the jury need to speak up a little bit? They're having trouble hearing you.
Okay. He was a member. I was his teacher in 5th grade.
And because of all the listening stuff, I'm just going to call you by your first name. Is that okay? Okay. And you said you were a teacher in 5th grade. And let me kind of skip where you work now, but you went on and did other things in education, correct?
Hang on, my bad. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, how old was Tanner a student?
As I recall, I did not have him for the full year. He came to us and then he left, I think, before the end of the year.
And from your memory, moving around a lot?
I mean, I just know from that, he wasn't with me for a full year.
Okay, did he make good grades when he was in your class?
That I don't remember.
What about his home life? What do you remember about that?
I don't remember a lot about home life. I just remember being in the classroom.
Did you ever meet his parents?
If I did, I don't remember.
Do you remember where he was living?
I remember that he was living with a cousin that was also in the same grade, or maybe a grade below. But he was living with a family where there was a cousin that also went to the school, but wasn't in my class.
How would that living situation classified?
Homeless, or I can't remember the politically correct term, but when you are a multi-family sharing a home space.
And when Tanner came into your class, was he diagnosed with a developmental disorder at that time?
I do not. He was diagnosed as being on the spectrum. I cannot remember if that happened with us. I kind of feel like it did. And then, or it was like a newly diagnosed. So, but on the spectrum, high functioning on the spectrum.
And was he referred for special education?
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
Was that kind of new for you having to sit on the spectrum? Or
Yes, he was one of my first ones.
Now, when someone has a situation where they're not in stable living, stable housing, did that make it harder to identify people who need special education at that time?
For those of us in education, when we know how to serve the kids. So I would say not necessarily. I would say that when you are in the classroom and you are seeing social interactions and classroom management, you can see things that may need to be looked at a little deeper.
So describe that for me with Tanner. What was his classroom behavior? His social interactions.
So Tanner struggled socially, partially, I'm sure, from moving. Coming in the middle of the year is hard to do. And so struggling with social norms, I would say.
Do you remember having friends?
I do not, but I don't think he was with us. I feel like, I know it wasn't the beginning of the year. I know it wasn't the end of the year. So I don't remember exactly the time frame. I just remember that it was kind of a chunk in the middle of the year.
Can you recall how other children were treating him at that time or not?
They thought he was, they thought he was odd. He didn't, when you're in fifth grade, you're starting to recognize like that maybe you shouldn't announce to the class that you have to go to the bathroom,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So maybe a little standoffish, but we also, there were a lot of things that I did to try to build community.
Like, tell me some things about that, about the structure of your classroom.
We did class meetings every morning, and which composed of a greeting, where we worked on making eye contact and greeting each other. And then we would do a one-word check-in so that people would know, hey, and people could expand if they wanted to on how they were doing that day, so that the class would know if someone's struggling a little bit to maybe give some space. And we would usually play some sort of little game in that little morning meeting.
And did you think that structure that you had going, the routines you had going, was helpful for Tanner?
I couldn't say. I think that they were helpful. Morning meetings were something that I did for years, and I think they were helpful to my class.
And you mentioned like one of the social norms he was violating was kind of blurting things out. Was that common?
Yes.
What about, did you have art and music in your class?
Yes.
Did Tanner react to either of those well?
I can't remember specifically, Tanner, but the children, we would listen to Disney soundtracks for group work and then classical music for independent work. And that was just something that I would play lowly in the background so that it wasn't so distracting, like if you heard pencils dropping and things like that.
Do you remember what your relationship with Tanner was like?
I enjoyed being Tanner's teacher.
You think he enjoyed you teaching him?
I thought so, yeah.
Did you ever see Tanner get upset?
Actually, I don't recall, no. Nothing that sticks out.
So for you, you were able to keep him calm and motivated?
I think so. I do remember when he left that the school he went to called us pretty quickly to ask what were some things that we were doing to help with classroom management. So I enjoyed I enjoyed being a teacher.
It sounds like you put a lot of money into it. Were you able to kind of talk to the other teachers and kind of tell them how about your relationship with Tanner and what worked well for you?
I called them.
You think Tanner knew that you loved him?
I have all my kids know that I love them.
When you talked about Tanner burning out, so he had to go to the bathroom, briefly, how the other kids take that? That held a little up for him?
That was, I would take the class to the bathroom. I would only send them a few at a time. You don't send a whole class into the bathroom together. The rest of us would sit in the hallway and play a game while we waited for our rotations. The time I remember, we were coming back from the library, everybody had their books. And when it was Tanner's turn to go in the bathroom, he brought me his books and said, "Can you take these back for me? Because I'm going to be in there for a while." And which made me laugh. And the kids kind of giggled about it too. So
Was there a story about the Mad Libs?
yes, Mad Libs was something that we would do in our morning meeting. It's a good way to learn parts of speech. And Tanner I remember him really loving to do Mad Libs. And we were having a class party. I'm assuming Valentine's, because you only get 3 parties. He really wanted the class to do Mad Libs. And I said, "No, the class doesn't want to do that. We're going to do this." But I said, "But you can take the Mad Libs book and you can do it if you'd like to." And then
Could you spell that?
Mad Libs,
Uh-huh.
like the old from the 60s, like the MADLIBS.
Okay.
Mad Libs.
I said that for, okay.
Okay. I told him that he could do the Mad Libs by himself if he'd like to. And he did. And he was very much laughing and enjoying himself. But really, I could tell he was trying to sell it to get everybody, because doing a Mad Libs by yourself, you know what your adjectives are and your nouns are. It kind of, it's not as funny as when you're doing it with someone who has no idea what the story is.
I remember Mad Libs. What about the story about shampoo?
There was a day where Tanner came and he had his snow hat on, and he came to school and he sat down and he took his hat off, and I looked at his hair and it had some dried bubbles in it. And I said, "Tanner, honey, do you still have shampoo in your hair?" And he immediately felt it and said, "Oh my gosh, I forgot to wash it out." And so I sent him to the nurse so that she could help him get his hair washed out.
You take care of it.
Mhm.
John, may I first?
Yes.
This is Defense Exhibit 70. Kristen, you want to identify that?
That is our class picture.
And can you identify Tanner in the photo?
Yes,
Which one is he?
he is on the second to the back row, and he is second from the left.
Tanner, I move to admit Defense Exhibit 70 and publish it.
Any objection? No objection. Defense Exhibit 70, and you wish to publish the point that the jury.
Yes, please. Second row. That was very good.
Okay. You passed the witness.
Yes.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Ron. Ma'am, I just have a couple of questions for you. My name is James Stainton, and I'm the district attorney for Washington Jack County. And I get the idea, ma'am, that you love all of your students, don't you? You're one of those teachers, right, that loves all your students. And is that, yes?
Yes.
Yes, okay. I get it, even though, you said that you only saw Tanner for, it would seem like a few months in the middle of the year, is that right?
Yes.
But you put the same effort into him as you do to all of your students, don't you?
Yes.
And you said a little bit, and just to be sure here, it's not unusual for kids that kind of move in the middle of the year to have problems adjusting and socializing, is it?
No, that's not unusual.
Not unusual. But it seemed like that whatever you did for your students, including Tanner, like the morning meetings, you did that for their benefit to help them socialize. Right?
Yes.
And you don't have anything to say, even during that short period, that you knew the defendant, Tanner Horner, that he had any problems with that.
I'm
Having the
sorry.
morning meetings and doing the things that you needed him to do.
Yes, he enjoyed the morning meetings. Yes.
That's what I was asking.
Okay.
He was able to participate with the other students
Yes.
and communicate whatever you had asked as far as getting their one word.
Mhm.
I'm assuming that's good, bad, or
Mhm.
happy or unhappy. Is that right?
Mhm.
And he was able to do that.
Yes.
That's what.
Redirect.
Nothing further, thank you.
May this witness be excused?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Hang on just a minute. Okay. You'll follow deputy. Who do you have next? Yes.
From my perspective, that has this is used effective, nor is it working. This is used for separation. So you have a witness that is put up that has added absolutely nothing. And in fact, from my perspective, you have 12 jurors watching a former teacher of this defendant who's crying. I would have asked one question on cross: are you crying for this innocent 7-year-old angel who was murdered? Or are you crying for, in my opinion, it's not adding anything to any type of mitigation box. And frankly, again, I don't know why she's crying.
Right.
It did not come off well.
So he likes
at all.
Mad Libs. Okay.
Yeah, I did Mad Libs too.
I mean,
Didn't we all?
Yeah, I mean, and he was a little standoffish. Okay, he was a new kid in class. I mean, hold on a second.
You're testifying, and once you have testified, do not discuss your testimony with anybody else except the lawyers, okay? So we're gonna ask you some questions outside the presence of the jury to start, okay? All right, Ms. Anderson?
I'm not sure, Your Honor, what you would like me to ask.
Well, I'm gonna kind of treat this like a 705 hearing, so,
Oh,
I
okay.
mean, or I can let the state go first, it's whichever way y'all wanna do it.
Oh, well, Your Honor, it's not my objection, so, I mean, they have asked for this to take on board hire, so
Okay.
they get to go first.
Okay.
And Your Honor, for purposes of the record, the witness has requested that we use her name, Beth,
Okay,
instead of the full name,
that's fine.
and we'll provide a full name to the court reporter.
Mr. State,
Is it okay if I just say ma'am? Is that okay?
Ma'am's good. I'm old. It works.
Okay, sure of that. And ma'am, it's my understanding that you are a speech language pathologist
I am.
by training, is that correct?
That's correct.
And as part of that, you have a master's in speech therapy as well?
Yes, I do.
And I think there's something that you also get certified to get your C's.
I have,
Is that right? What does that mean?
I was the in-home facilitator for the autistic students.
Okay. In-home facilitator.
Yeah,
What is that?
I didn't tell you too
hang
much,
on,
did
hang
I?
on, hang on. Gotta have one person talking at one time, so let him finish asking the question before we get the answer, okay? Go ahead, Mr. State.
I'll start. What is an in-home facilitator?
An in-home facilitator works with the classroom teacher and works with there at the school to make sure behavior is being reduced in a proper manner to make sure that that the student is there and learns. Basically, is what it is, without all the erratic behaviors interfering with the ability for them to learn. Plus, the rest of the students in the classroom don't want to be interrupted either. And then they also go into the home, work with the parents, set up a behavioral program so that the parents will know how to react to inappropriate behaviors. And then I also took certain students into the community to make certain that they understood how we behave in public. And then I go home.
Okay. So let me ask you, as part of that, with regard to these students, do you do any testing of these students? Did you do any testing?
Not for autism. That's the diagnostic.
Okay. And did you make from that testing as to what you were going to do with those students?
That's correct.
So you took what the diagnostician said and used your training to form a plan.
Exactly. Plus, before I just jumped in there with the diagnostician's recommendations, I went to the classroom and observed.
But you wouldn't be able to testify as to what a diagnostician recommended because you're not the diagnostician.
That is correct.
But you use their expertise in what you're doing.
That's correct.
Okay. And as it applies to the defendant, Tanner Horner, what type of, let me just ask you, what year did you first come into contact with him?
I knew you were going to ask that. Either 2003 or 2004, somewhere around there.
When was the last time you had contact with him?
Probably the last month of school, the last month of school in December of either 2003 or 2004.
And so you only had contact with him during that one school year.
That's correct.
And what school was that at?
Hazel Junior High.
Junior. And with regard to your contact with him, did you take the diagnostician's opinions and things and form some form of plan for him?
Yes, sir.
And was that you that did that or somebody else?
That was me.
That was you. Okay. There are a lot of people involved when we do special education, so I want to make sure it's you. It was you.
It was me.
And from that plan, what are you going to testify to today as to your interactions with Tanner Horner?
I had been asked to just talk about Tanner, how he was, his behavior, if I had difficulties with him, if I saw erratic behaviors. And I'll be real honest with you, Tanner was a great kid. We enjoyed each other's company. He behaved. Now, sometimes when he was playing games, because I would take him with another student, and we would go out in the community and would, go to a park and perhaps play a game at the table, or go to a restaurant, learn how to order, how to sit and wait for that order to be served. We went out to my place one time because I had pet deer. Pet deer.
I'm going to ask you about it. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I just worked with them, with these students, to help them learn coping for whatever the situation was. Because cognitively, you throw something in on an individual who has Asperger's, Tanner especially, you throw something out of the ordinary into his daily schedule, and he's off. He can't adjust to it quickly. You need to slowly get him used to it, help him to think about what his behavior is going to be.
All right. And so the summary of your testimony is only going to be that which with you saw him.
That's
observed
correct.
him. And so you're not planning on testifying about what the diagnostician said? And you're not planning on testifying about all the plans that you created from that diagnostician's recommendations?
Would you repeat that?
Are you planning on testifying about whatever the plans you created relying on those diagnostician's opinions?
Yes.
I don't have further questions. Ms. Anderson?
Hi, Beth, how are you doing?
Doing well, thank you.
Hold on one moment, let me get to my other notes. In formulating a treatment plan, are you required to rely, or is it necessary for you to rely upon the results and reports of other people, such as a diagnostician?
The diagnostician and the teacher. Yes, ma'am.
Are the treatment plans that you provide and that you perform and develop, are they based upon your training experience?
Yes.
Are they based upon your personal observations?
Yes.
Are they based upon your interviews with with the student or with the family and teachers?
Yes,
And for today, even the, well, let me back up. Are all of those things that you obtain, are those necessary in order for you to provide a treatment plan and develop a treatment plan?
of course they are.
Are your treatment plans tailored to each student?
Exactly.
Why is it important to tailor it to each student?
Repeat,
Why is it important to tailor it to each student?
well, to meet their needs.
Are you here to offer an opinion whether the diagnoses that was given to you from the diagnostician were true and accurate?
To the best of my knowledge.
Well, are you here to give an opinion about the diagnoses? Or-
Yes, I can do that.
Well, have you been asked to give an opinion on that, I guess I should say? Or are you here to talk about the treatment plan that you provided for Tanner?
I haven't been asked.
But is it your understanding that today, when we get in front of the jury, that you will be asked to tell the jury what your role was in Tanner's life during that time you spent with him?
Yes,
And are you here to tell the jury about the activities that y'all did?
yes,
And are you here to tell the jury about why you chose the activities that you chose?
yes,
And are you here to tell the jury about, again, your observations as to how Tanner responded to those activities?
yes.
I have nothing further on.
Anything else? Is there an objection? Only thing I would object to is any testimony based on what another expert told her or anything else. That would be, you're saying an additional expert testimony based on her experience. But if she's just going to offer her impressions of being around the defendant, I don't have any objections.
I don't have any problem with that. I don't want her testifying from anything not in evidence that somebody else may have done. So in other words, she can't go into what the diagnostician's records or reports said. She can testify, I received the diagnostician's report, and as a result, here's what I did.
I don't believe I was planning on going into that anyway.
Then we're all on the same page.
Okay.
Yeah.
and If I could have 2 shakes to rent the restroom.
Okay. Anybody else? Yep. All right, 2 minutes. We got 2 minutes.
We may need 3 now that he's still. Okay, Cody, first we had the 5th grade teacher. Now we've got the speech therapist.
Yes, yes. Again, this is, I guess, a strategy of the defense. Separation from all the bad evidence that exists in this case. I don't believe it's effective, but
Well, yeah,
they've got their line up, and the cross-examinations. Again,
Is it? I don't know.
actually, you know, there's a right to a defense. The lawyers are they're doing what they can. I mean, it's sometimes you just have to go with what you got, and I'm just giving a suggestion that it's different than others, and other lawyers will disagree and how to do that, but they think this might be the most effective tool to do it. There's nothing of substance being added, but it does, when you hear and see everything that you guys have been hearing and seeing, provide separation and daylight between those events, and they're trying to,
In other words, let's drag this out.
yeah, and use that to an advantage. I'm not saying it's working or even effective, but that's the only explainable thing that's going on.
Yeah, I don't think that the jurors will ever get the images of what happened to little Athena, or both the images and the audio, out of their minds.
No.
Because from what Rebecca said and what Terry said, when the jurors saw that, people were sobbing. It was a lot of visible emotion. I mean, you can't see and hear that and not be
Yeah.
affected.
And then their response is going to be like just, a normal person's response when you're seeing these witnesses come up. The expectation is, from the juror's perspective, that they're going to hear something that might push them toward that mitigation component in box 2 if the jury even gets there.
Have you heard any
You know?
mitigation so far?
No, I mean, they're making their best effort. Again, like, he's entitled to a defense, and sometimes you just, like I said, have to go with what you got, but not any significant mitigation, because again, a lot of kids have these issues. It's
You like to eat coins.
I mean, I've eaten the quarter before when I was a boy during a truth or dare, and like I said, I think it's not comprised of nickel. Pardon me, with lead. It's got nickel in that as well.
Yeah, because Jen Falk and I, is there lead in coins? And
Yeah.
it's like, no. Okay.
and of course that's after all the quarters were used to be silver. But the point is, yes, young boys are going to do crazy things, and ultimately the expert's job is to say that it had an effect on the result in the case in question. They're offering testimony as an expert, and his expertise is in the area of the effects of lead on the frontal lobe of the brain. And when it's developing at a young age, that's why that purported expert kept trying to come back to this defendant when he was young and the toxicity of the lead when you're young, because the brain is still developing. It's kind of like microdosing with vaccines. You have to take into account the body mass index of the subject. And so, but if you were listening to the evidence, he didn't offer anything of substance to move the needle.
There's no medical records.
None. He's literally reading studies that a lot of these desk jockeys do and giving a general opinion. Well, yeah, I mean, we all know that lead is not a good thing. We take that out of paint, and not saying it causes, everyone who swallowed pennies to do those things. He's not the only boy who's done something silly in his childhood or sat in a corner while the babysitter watched him. So it's tough because the jury is waiting for something. And from my perspective, they have not received a something yet that would
justify this.
Even register in the other part of their brain. No.
Yeah, it's I don't know. I've been a police reporter, crime reporter, covering courts and stuff for about 30 years, and I cannot ever in my career. I mean, certainly, cover cases that were similar, like Siobhan Randall and others, but a case where you just have this level of evidence from start to finish. I mean, it's just extraordinary. Yeah,
and even the defense experts who are very clear about there is no multi-personality disorder. I mean,
well, he couldn't,
you can't even get past that hurdle. Again, these are the defense witnesses.
Right.
Okay, so that's very crucial. And when they're saying that this was made up, okay, that doesn't help you. And again, the defense team is just going with what they have,
which is very little.
Very little if your own defense experts are helping the state.
Exactly. And what Cody's talking about is on Friday, Monday, and Tuesday, they had what's called Daubert hearings, which are basically hearings that they used to pre-qualify experts that are going to testify. And Rebecca Lopez, our senior crime and justice reporter, sat in all those hearings. And yeah, from what she said, none of those experts, ultimately they all agreed, these experts, he doesn't have multiple personality disorder. He knows right from wrong. So, it doesn't feel like even the experts that they're going to line up are really going to help very much.
Yeah. This is just the mitigation evidence they're putting forth so far isn't really mitigation evidence. It's just he was a troubled young boy,
right,
who was on the spectrum, perhaps still is. That's what he said in his interview. But this same individual in this photo, clearly driving a truck for FedEx with pre-designated routes, with deliveries, with boxes on them and addresses, his brain functions like a regular delivery driver.
Right.
So whether he disclosed that in his employee interview or not is irrelevant to the law in this case. He's making conscious decisions. The synapses in his brain are firing to his hands to do physical things of a very evil nature to this young innocent child. He did those, and he's going to suffer the consequences.
Right. Well, and he had enough presence of mind to be like, okay, I need to go clean that truck.
Yeah.
I need to cover the camera. I need to do all these things.
Yeah. I mean, the obstruction component is just the cherry on top. You're put aside the fact that it's always a me issue with Tanner Horner. I'm worried about losing my job. I'm worried about this. I want to see my son for last Christmas, by the way. What do you think about offending his family? They'll never see this little girl again for Christmas. And those Barbie dolls that were a Christmas present. You can't write this script any more evil than it already exists. And everything he did, going out the next day, calling these people on the phone, talking to presumably his boss. It smells like vomit in here. I mean, there is no remote. This guy has ice water in his veins, smoking a cigarette one after another, engaging law enforcement, the barricade, telling them to move.
Right.
I have places to be. Y'all keep looking for the girl that I just murdered and dumped in a river. Career. It's all about the we, and you're one spoke in a wheel driving that wagon forward. I would like to think that the team that the DA has here, James Stanton, that they would make a wise decision and really foster that credibility and trust they have with the jurors. So, we're not going to do that again, because at some point, trial lawyers, can kind of put themselves ahead of the case. That makes sense. Mm-hmm. And it comes off as selfish because you're there to represent your client. And the client here is the state of Texas and that little girl. And he can walk up there and say, I'm not going to do that again. Unfortunately, this man, he made me play that but for having that, there's only two people in the back of that van. One of them is dead. His actions, you can put that in your future danger charge. Okay. Put what he did. Career. It's all about the we, and you're one spoke in a wheel driving that wagon forward. I would like to think that the team that the DA has here, James Stanton, that they would make a wise decision.
Right, everyone may see. We are ready to proceed.
Good morning. Morning.
Now, for the purposes of this hearing, we're just going to call you by first name, Beth, is that okay?
That's wonderful.
Well, Beth, if you'll please introduce yourself to the jury.
I'm Beth Weaver. I was an in-home facilitator. I'm a speech and language pathologist.
Now, you kind of jumped ahead on me. You said that you were a speech pathologist, and that you seem to use that in past tense. Have you retired?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
As a speech pathologist, what did you do?
I worked with them. When I worked in the school district, I worked with students who had cognitive deficits, who had speech impediment, who had dysphagia or swallowing difficulties, who stuttered. I worked with a lot of the students from Resource that just had a delay in language and difficulty understanding what was really being asked of them in the general classroom.
Did you work with students with neurodevelopmental disorders?
I did.
Now, Beth, before you retired, you mentioned that you worked with the school district. What school districts did you work with?
All of them, Fort Worth ISD and Azle.
Now, Beth, you also had told the jury that you were an in-home facilitator. What is an in-home facilitator?
An in-home facilitator is an individual who tries to help the student adjust to the classroom, what's expected of them in the classroom, how to behave in the classroom, and also goes into the home, works with the parents, makes sure they have a program that would work on the behaviors that need to be worked on. And then I also took individuals out into the environment, teach them how to order in a restaurant, teach them how loudly to talk at the table and how loudly not to talk, and just teach them etiquette and go over situations that they have difficulty staying within the lines of what we consider to be close to normal.
Now, you worked with the families as well. Why would you work with the families?
Because he lives there and because that program that student is working on in the classroom, the same type of reinforcement and the same type of punishment and the same type of results are expected out of the home also.
What happens if you don't have that balance where you're working with you in one case where the rules are enforced and then going home, the rules are not enforced? How does that affect the efficacy of the program?
It affects it for sure because the student is at home much more than they are at school. I know that everyone thinks they're at school all day, so they're at school longer, but the effect of the home disciplinary actions affect what he's or she's going to do at school. If they get away with interrupting or whatever, losing their temper, getting their way, being a spoiled child, they're going to expect that very same behavior when they get to school at first.
So it seems that this program that you developed isn't just a behavior modification for the student, but also for the people at home.
That's right.
You're on the approach?
Yes, ma'am.
Beth, I'm going to add you was already been admitted as defense exhibit number 69. If you'll just glance through those for a moment for me, and you can keep those up there. And Beth, while you're glancing through those, I was just going to ask you a couple of questions. One is, as an in-home facilitator, did you maintain records of your visits with Tanner and his family?
Yes, ma'am.
And as you're looking through those records, I want you to tell me whether or not your records from your visits are contained in those records.
Yep, they sure are.
Okay, I'm sorry. Are the records that you?
Yes, they are.
Okay, thank you. Beth, are the services that you provide to the students, do they fall into the category of being therapeutic?
Yes,
Why is that?
because we're changing behavior.
Did Azle always have in-home facilitators?
No, ma'am, I was the first. You have met the first.
When did they start using them?
2003, I believe. maybe a little bit in 2002.
And what were some of the reasons a student might qualify for an in-home facilitator?
Behavioral issues. Let me just say, can I speak freely?
Yes, ma'am.
Autism is,
Well, hang on, let's do this. Let's do question and answer, okay?
Okay. At the time that Azle ISD started these programs, were they having a lot of autistic students in the school? Or did they have a lot of autistic students?
we had our share.
Were there any difficulties that these students were having in relation to mainstreaming?
Absolutely.
The program that was started, was that started to help these autistic students kind of navigate school?
Yes.
And your role in that was as a navigator.
Yes.
When the program first started, how many students were you responsible for?
In the beginning, 7 or 8. As time went on, it grew into the teens.
Beth, what was the goal of the in-home facilitator program?
Is to help the student control their behavior, to help the student understand why a certain behavior is necessary, to help the student navigate through life using the behaviors they have learned.
How was it determined, or how did ISD decide who was in or wasn't in the program?
They were tested by another individual, a diagnostician.
And if they met the qualifications, then they would be admitted to the program?
Yes, ma'am.
Was Tanner admitted to this program?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so you said that they would be seen by a diagnostician. Was it just a diagnostician, or were there other requirements that had to be met in order to be admitted into the program?
Shush. What do you mean by other?
Well, was it just one person, or did you have a team of people?
Team.
What other types of team members helped make that decision?
The teacher would be involved, the diagnostician, the school psychologist, and the school counselor, and the speech and language pathologist.
You mentioned a whole set of goals that the program had. What did you do to help these students achieve those goals and to navigate?
I worked with them on coping behaviors. I put them in situations that I knew would cause them anger or frustration so that we could work through that and let the student understand, oh, yeah, if I do this behavior, it's a whole lot better than the other one I've been doing.
Now, you said that you had about 7 to 8 students. Did you have specific schedules for each student? Did you work with them as a group? Did you work with them one-on-one? How did that work?
Most autistic students I saw on a one-to-one basis. And when they reached a certain level of behavior, you know, I did put a couple or several together, and because that only enhances their ability to be around people and behave correctly.
Now, Beth, I want to turn your attention to Tanner Horn. In your capacity as an in-home facilitator, did you ever provide services to Tanner?
Yes,
Do you recall what grade he was in when you first started the services?
7th grade, I believe.
Do you remember how old he was?
Lord, no. I don't know how old I am.
And Tanner had qualified through all the diagnostics to get into the program, is that correct?
That is correct. Tanner had also gone to the Child Study Center and went through testing there.
Can I have a moment?
Yes, ma'am.
No, wake up. Don't stay awake. Can I clear something up? Can I clear something?
I want to talk to you a little bit about Tanner and your work with him. When you work with Tanner, did you have the opportunity to observe his behavior with other students?
Yes,
Did you have the opportunity to observe his behavior with his teachers?
yes,
Did you have the opportunity to go into his home?
yes,
Did you have the opportunity to not just go home, but meet with his mother and grandparents?
Yes,
Did you take him out into the community?
yes.
I want to ask you a little bit about your observations during these time periods. How would you describe Tanner's ability to recognize social cues?
Social cues, did you say?
Social cues, yes.
Not good.
Why do you say that?
I mean, at times it was okay, but he just, his cognitive abilities stopped at a certain point for him to be able to understand jokes, teasing, bullying. He was definitely bullied through school. And those are aggravating to him. And he got angry, of course.
Did Tanner appear to be able to identify other people's emotions or feelings?
At times.
Do you feel like he was able to understand boundaries?
No,
Why do you say that?
because it's true. That's all I can say is, if he wanted to do something, and whatever he wanted to do was an item that belonged to someone else, it was difficult for him to understand that he couldn't use that item if they did not give him permission.
Beth, I wanted to back up just one bit. As a speech pathologist, did you often work with students on the autism spectrum?
Yes,
And how can a speech pathologist help an autistic student?
training for a speech and language pathologist includes cognitive, includes emotion, how someone interprets others' emotions and how they interpret what it is they're feeling inside of them. And we were trained in methods to do that. That's about all I can tell you. We were trained.
So you had mentioned that Tanner had difficulty recognizing and following social cues. Is that in common with an autistic student?
No, it is not.
Now, Beth, what about concrete thinking? Can you explain to the jury what concrete thinking means?
I can. Well, as you know, the difference between concrete and not concrete. Concrete thinking is the ability to think on what goes on in the immediate. I'm not sure I know where you want me to go with this.
I guess what I'm getting at is during the time that you worked with Tanner, did he ever exhibit concrete thinking and taking things too literal?
Oh, yes.
Can you give me an example of that?
Well, if someone, if he were in a classroom and someone was playing a joke on him, number one, he couldn't interpret that as a joke if it was offensive to him. And instead of just dealing with that in a manner that would be accepted, he gets angry. His anger would be pretty bad at times.
Did you ever see him lash out at any other students?
I have never seen that.
Were you ever concerned that he might lash out at other students?
No, ma'am.
You had mentioned that when playing with other students, that he could get angry. Could you tell what the basis of the anger was? I mean, was it because anger to get anger? Was he frustrated? Was he annoyed? Could you tell the difference?
He basically he couldn't understand it. Just couldn't understand it.
When playing with other students, did you ever see him become frustrated with the process?
I can't remember the name of this game years ago. It was a card game. You collect the cards and then you play it.
The Pokemon?
Might be that, sure. When I had him with another student, they would play that. They couldn't wait. That was exciting to them. But if the other student did not follow the rules, and believe me, Tanner knew the rules. He just didn't understand all of them, but he could quote them to you. If the other student did not follow those rules, he couldn't take that. He just didn't understand that. No, you can't do that. I told you earlier, you can't do that. He needed the world to behave in the way he had learned the world was supposed to behave. That's not the world.
Well, how important is structure?
Terribly important,
Why is structure terribly important?
because it's the same thing over and over. There's no change. Tanner had difficulty with autistic students have difficulty with change in general, any change in the routine. That will set them off. They can't adjust to that. If you sat down with them and you told them ahead of time and you kind of worked them through it and you helped them to decide, well, my behavior needs to be this and not this, then they would do all right. But if it was just a change just happened, that would, that just messes their day up. They cannot adjust.
Is this one of those things that you worked on with Tanner during the program?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, but before I get into the actual program that you had with Tanner, I want to go back to you collecting all the information in order to develop that program. Now, before you had talked about the importance of going into the home and speaking with the parents and the grandparents and the caregivers in this case, did you, and I believe you told us that you had gone to Tanner's home
Yes,
and you had met with his mother.
yes.
And you met with his
I met with his mother briefly,
Okay.
mostly grandmother.
How important is it to go to the place where the student lives? Why does that matter when you're developing a program?
Well, it gives me an insight into how they live at home, the circumstances and the environment that they live in. And all of that, of course, affects our behavior.
Well, you said that it can affect their behavior. How can home life affect the behavior of a student who is on the spectrum?
No different than from any other child. Okay? Home life affects every child. The difference is a child who is not on the autism spectrum can adjust to those changes and can go along with the day in a normal manner. Children with autism cannot adjust. They have difficulty adjusting to those changes, and it's frustrating to them.
And that's where you come in to teach some coping skills to help them adjust to those changes.
Yes, ma'am.
You said that you briefly met his mother. What was your first impression of her?
I did not feel like I didn't see any display of mothering. I didn't see that. Hannah was upset because she was there in the home and she would get into his things. He didn't like that at all. And she wasn't in, like I said, I didn't see her very often. I know I saw her once and I possibly could have seen her twice. She was not a mother. She just wasn't a mother. She just did not have the motherly instincts. She had problems of her own. And Tanner was put on the back burner.
You have a note, Aaron? Now, Beth, I'm going to publish what has already been admitted as defense exhibit number 69. Do you recognize this document?
I sure recognize that scribbling. Yes,
Is that your scribble?
that's mine.
Okay. You had mentioned that Tanner's mom was having some issues. Were there any concerns about her being in the home?
Tanner didn't particularly like it back then. Like I said, she got into his things, moved things around. I mean, he had a routine and he needed to stick to that routine. And with his mother being in the home, and it was a small home, with his mother being there, it just put a stick in his spokes. He just couldn't roll with it.
Now, Beth, did the grandparents have any concerns with Tanner and the mom being in the home? Or I should say, I see documented that there were concerns. Is that something that affected the stability of the home?
You need to rephrase that.
I think I did. That was a very good question.
No.
I'll try again.
Okay.
Did the grandparents in this case have any concerns with the mom being in the home?
Oh, I don't
Did
know.
her presence cause any instability?
For him, yes, but I don't know about the rest of the household.
And in your records, you had documented that the mother had not always, or had been in and out of his life, and that he had moved several times during his youth.
Yes.
Why is it important to document that he had moved several times?
Kind of seems like we're just repeat and repeat, doesn't it? It is important because anything that happens in a child's life affects them. And moving around is not stability. And it would be difficult to continue a normal routine in all different situations because, I don't know where they moved to. I don't know what that was like. He didn't either. He just had to go.
Right, so moving on to some more of your records. You had noted that this an area of concern and that the grandparents believe that his aggressive behavior stemmed from the instability with the mother. Were you able to observe anything to support these concerns?
Where did I get, are you asking me, where did you get the idea that they were concerned about the mother being in the home?
Yes.
Well, actually, the grandmother said to me at one meeting that when the mother was there that she said her being here infringes upon Tanner's routine.
And we've already established that.
Absolutely.
And I wanted to note one more concern where the parents were concerned that MDT for Thursday, what is that? What is an MDT?
I don't remember.
Okay. And did you, could it be multidisciplinary team?
Did I what?
Could it be multidisciplinary team?
Oh, I bet it is. We could just make something up. Nobody knows.
Now that, one of the things that was noted in your records was that the mother was back home and therefore Tanner's behavior is not exactly the same as before. Would that indicate to you that the mother's presence caused these disturbances?
My opinion is yes.
And one of the other concerns was that the effect of mom being in and out of his life.
Sure.
Oops, getting ahead of myself. Okay, Tanner's mom ever get involved in any of the sessions that you had at the home? And Judge, we can turn up the lights.
Okay.
Oh,
Let there be light.
let there. Ask that again, please.
Okay, did Tanner's mother ever get involved in any of the sessions you had in the home?
No.
Did she ever make her presence known during these sessions?
She was in the room, and that's it.
And would she ever make any comments about what was going on during the sessions, even though she wasn't directly involved in them? You mentioned his, in your records, you talked about how his behavior seemed to change whether mom was there or not there. Based upon your observations, do you feel that he was doing better with your program when she was in the home or out of the home?
Out.
Why is that?
Because her being in the home interrupts his routine.
Also in that home was his grandmother. Did you, what were your first impressions of her?
She's a lovely lady, and she tried her best.
Did she have her own issues?
Probably. We didn't discuss them.
Did you have the opportunity to watch Tanner and his grandmother interact together?
Yes, a little bit.
And how did those interactions go?
It's according to what she asked Tanner to do. But most was okay. I mean, I'm sure they had their differences, but I never saw him get angry at his grandmother.
Over the course of your sessions with the family and with Tanner, and based upon your observations, did his grandmother seem to love Tanner?
Oh, yes.
And did Tanner seem to love him, her?
Oh, yes. They adored each other.
And did his grandmother seem motivated to try to help Tanner and to make sure that he gets the services that he needed?
Yes.
Do you think she was able to help the way she wanted to, or only the way that she was able to?
I can't
Hang
answer
on,
that for her.
okay, hang on just a minute. The objection's the same. You don't need to answer that.
I'm not going to answer that.
Did you have the opportunity to meet his grandfather?
Yes, I did.
And did you watch the interactions between Tanner and his grandfather?
Yes, some.
What were those like?
The grandfather was a little more demanding, a little gruff with him at times, I thought.
Did you ever see him raise his voice or hear him raise his voice to Tanner?
Yes,
Did you ever hear him bark at him or snap at him?
yes.
Did you ever hear him say ugly things to Tanner?
Just in an ugly tone.
When this happened, were you able to watch Tanner's demeanor and how he accepted this?
Yes,
And how did his demeanor change?
yes.
How so?
You could tell it upset him. You could tell he wasn't happy with what he was being asked to do, and certainly not the way.
Was his grandfather very involved in this program that you
No.
established?
Not really.
Did you ever try to get him involved in the program?
No,
Did he ever express any interest in trying to help out?
no.
Did you ever meet with him to try to work with him on how to handle a child that was on the spectrum?
We talked about behavior and how one person's behavior can affect the other person's behavior. But no, we didn't get it. He was a serviceman. I didn't push him too far.
Did he seem receptive to your information?
No,
Did he seem to understand what you were doing was so important?
no.
Did he seem to care?
Well, I think he cared because I was in the home, in and out of the home. And it's not that we didn't get along with each other, because we did. He just didn't understand, had no understanding. He just wanted Tanner to quit having his tantrums, to behave. And he was the one setting Tanner's behavior off.
So it's kind of like a vicious cycle.
It was, yes, ma'am.
And so you have to work not just on one, you have to be able to work on both of them.
That's correct.
And if one is not willing or receptive to,
Just
Help.
just one meeting.
Don't leave your witness.
if one person is not willing to accept the help, how does that affect the other?
Well, the program can't work. Have you ever ridden a bicycle with one tire? It's a little difficult, and that's the way this works.
So let's talk about some of the other parts of the program that you worked on with. You had mentioned earlier about cognitive processing, and I think you also meant social skills. I also mentioned social skills. Let's start with cognitive processing. What did you mean when you said cognitive processing?
What I mean is, when we do a behavior, there's going to be a consequence. And in the normal way the brain works, you can foresee what that consequence may be. So you tell yourself, we don't want to do that. He doesn't foresee that. He just can't foresee that. He has to learn, he learned coping to stop and to think about it. What have I just done? And if I do this, what's going to happen? And that's a hard process for anyone. They have to stop themselves in the middle of whatever's happening. But he could not see, couldn't project what was going to happen.
So is cognitive processing, is that interrelated with the ability to problem solve?
Oh, absolutely.
And you mentioned that Tanner couldn't foresee consequences of his actions. Does that directly impact his ability to problem solve?
It can, yes, and probably does in many ways.
Based upon your observations of Tanner, could you see him attempting to work through the process to solve a problem?
I could. He was getting there. Let's put it that way.
And describe that for me.
He would stop. He would always look at me, and I'd just look at him back like, come on, let's think about this. You got to think about this. So he had learned, at least to stop what he was doing if it didn't feel like it was right. He didn't, in the beginning, he could not do that.
Well, how do our emotions play into our ability to problem solve?
How do our emotions?
Yes, when we're talking about problem solving, you talk about cognitive processing, but do our emotions affect our ability to cognitively process?
Certainly.
And so were you ever let's try that again. Did you ever see a situation where emotions or Tanner's emotions got in the way of his ability to problem solve?
Yes. For instance, playing the game with the other student, he knew those rules. He knew those rules, and that student just broke the rules. And so I would watch him, and he got to where when that happened, he would stop and think.
Did you ever work with him on the importance of being able to compromise?
Yeah,
Why is that important?
because when you're around people, you have compromise. It's not all about you.
How did your sessions on compromise go with Tanner?
Well, we didn't have. It's not like we had a session. Okay, today we're going to do nothing but compromise.
Mhm.
The compromising goes along with the problem solving and hopefully the understanding of what's going to happen. If a certain behavior is displayed, this is going to happen, and that's not good.
Now, Beth, you had also talked about the importance of learning social skills. Why is it important that we learn social skills?
Because we live in a social society.
What kind of social skills did you work on with Tanner?
We worked on talking about what other people wanted to talk about, not always what we wanted to talk about. Allowing other people to join us. If he's working on something, he's doing really well, and they come over and want to join him, let's let them. Maybe they have some good ideas.
You had mentioned earlier about community outings. What kind of outings would you take Tanner on?
We went to the park. We went to restaurants. We went out to my house to see the deer. That's about it. We went to numerous restaurants, some that were quiet and some that had a more noisy environment.
Why are these community outings important in your work?
In my work,
Yes, and your work with students.
because it helps them to learn to cope and to adjust and to accept what's happening around them without having a meltdown.
Throughout these outings, did you see any improvement in Tanner's behavior
Oh,
and
yes.
his coping?
Oh, yes. Yes, Tanner. At first, the first restaurant, he talked too loudly and, interrupted people around us. And as it went on, he learned not to do that. And he would ask me, am I talking too loudly? I would say, a little bit, yep. And he would adjust.
Now, Beth, I have some more of your records here. And one of the things that was discussed was the ability to reduce Tanner's tantrums and increase socialization skills to allow him the privilege of having friends.
Yeah.
Did Tanner have a lot of friends?
No. Tanner was bullied at school. So, he might have had, I don't ever know of one, to tell you the truth, but hopefully he did have friends, but I don't know of a single one.
You had talked about taking Tanner out to eat. And one of the notes that some of the behavior that you observed was he was excited to go with me to get a bite to eat. He was awkward when ordering his meal. He was not vested in any topic other than his areas of interest. I always initiated the conversation and Tanner would respond, but did not perpetuate a stream of conversation.
Right.
Was
Not unless it was his interest.
this uncommon, or is this uncommon with a person on the spectrum?
No.
And as you proceeded with these community outings, you said you were able to see some improvement?
Oh, yes.
And would that be noted by Tanner was being more talkative?
Yes. He communicated better because he talked with us, and he just had an overall improvement, really, which is why I recommended him continue.
And I'm not going to go through all of these slides with you, but I did have a question about these tick marks. What are these tick marks for? So, because when the jury goes back and takes these records back with them, I'd like them to be able to understand what it all means in there.
It means he did what? It means he entered the conversation well. He added to the conversation. He initiated. He talked loudly. No, that was not particularly good. But his turn taking was really improving. I was very proud of it.
But in spite of some of these, he still had some issues. And again, the jury will be able to take these records back and look at them. But you noted that goals are showing good improvement and continue with the current plan. How important is it to continue with these plans?
It's important. It's very important.
Why is it important?
To strengthen the coping skills that he's learned, and to help build his confidence that he is communicating with others. He's doing a good job. He's turn taking. He's just behaving well.
At this point, you recommended that the school continue with the current plan. Do you know if that happened?
I don't know for sure, but I don't think so.
And what can happen if a person who is learning new skills, showing improvement, is suddenly taken out of that program? What happens to those skills?
Well, I can't really say. It would be the individual. Speaking about our individual, he will either continue with what he's learned or it will go by the wayside.
Well, let me ask you this. How difficult is it to transfer the skills that he is learning with you while in your presence in these semi-controlled environments? How difficult is it to take that and put it into another context where he may not be with you, may not be in a controlled environment? I guess the transferability of these skills.
Yes. Well, at first it was difficult, but when he learns how to behave in a manner that is acceptable, then he goes on and he uses them. It was, in my opinion, it was very important that he continue. And I just don't think it happened.
Now, Beth, it's been 20 years since you've had Tanner as a student. It's been over 20 years since you were his in-home facilitator. How do you remember him so well?
I liked him. He was a great kid, and he was mannerly. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. I'm sorry I did that. I just had fun with him. He was a fun kid.
Now, Beth, you understand that he has pled guilty to the offense of capital murder that involved a kidnapping.
Yes, I do.
And you understand that there have been other allegations involved with that kidnapping and murder of Athena.
I don't know that. I have not involved myself in anything.
Now, Beth, are you saying that Tanner's autism was, the reason why this incident occurred?
No.
Do you feel that it's an excuse for what happened?
No.
Do you feel that it justifies
No.
what he did?
No.
Do you feel that it's a defense to what he did?
It's what?
A defense to what he did?
No, I don't. I'll tell you where it comes in my mind. This young man should have never been in that truck by himself.
Now, Beth, I want to go back to one last question. And that is, when you were Tanner's in-home facilitator, did you enjoy spending time with him?
Yeah, what?
Did you enjoy spending time with him?
Yes, very much.
All right, you're right, I'll pass the witness.
Mr. Staton, do you anticipate much cross-examination? All
There's been a lot going on with Judge. I don't know where it's gonna go.
right, let's take our morning break, okay? We'll start back up at 10 minutes to
10 minutes to 11.
Never been in that truck by himself?
Yeah, I guess she's had that opinion for 30 years. Quite convenient now.
And it's fair to say, though, that whatever you're talking about today about Mr. Horner is from 25 plus years ago. Is that
A
right?
long time ago, yes, sir.
And so I'm going to go through a couple of things here. But what you do remember, and you've looked at your records there, is that he had the capacity to change his behavior. Would you agree with that?
Yes,
And you
not as easily as, not as easily as children that aren't under the autism spectrum. But yes, his behavior can be changed, and it was.
And you noted that in your report. And I think we saw the little hash marks and things on there where you're giving him a score that says he's doing better as you're working with him. Is that right?
That's right.
And it seems like for all your records, he continued to do better throughout your training with him.
He did.
And this is through, you said the 7th grade, is that what you said?
Yes.
earlier? And at some point, it's up to him as to whether or not he continues with his positive behavior or not.
That's true.
Now, we talked a little bit about the family situation. And it looks to me from your records, and I think one of your records says specifically, that the grandparents were always a stable factor in his life. Did I read that right?
That sounds like something I would write,
Okay.
because I felt that way.
All right, I'll leave it at that. And because of that, I think you said that his grandparents, one or both, would at least attend your sessions or meetings or what have you. Is that right?
Except when we had our outings to restaurants, et cetera. But yes, they were there in the home.
And you'll agree with me, being there in that home, if you had seen anything that you felt was a problem in that home with the grandparents, with Mr. Horner in the 7th grade, you would have reported that, wouldn't you?
Yes, I would have.
Because that's because you're a mandatory reporter in Texas.
That's correct.
So you felt comfortable being in the home and working with Tanner in and out of the home.
Yes, I did.
And so as part of that, you said you taught him a lot of things about social cues, cognition, thinking, things of that nature, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, as part of your program, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like you're teaching them a lot about how they're supposed to act out in society. Is that right?
That is correct.
And this is not unusual for all sorts of kids with all sorts of other disabilities, not just autism.
That's correct.
And so in that vein, the things that you're teaching them is things on a basic level, like right and wrong.
Yes, sir.
Correct? So not stealing. Is that right?
As far as behaviors go.
Behaviors, of course. All the way down to how your voice level is. And those are those things that you are ingraining in them and giving them examples and showing them the right way to act.
Yes, sir.
And in this particular case, even though you had a limited experience with Mr. Horner, correct? And so you're teaching him what is right and what is not right.
When it comes to him, yes.
Of course. And at some point during that, you indicated that he was able to improve, and I think you said he was getting there.
He was. He sure was.
That's right. And that he can do these things. Correct.
He has been informed. Whether or not he applies it, that's up to him. But yes, he had learned.
Now, went over a lot of things. I'm trying to catch up here. So we talked about kind of this relationship. It seemed to be a little bit of a tense relationship with the mom being there and the grandparents participating. But even though that was going on, we still had the grandparents being active in his life.
Absolutely.
And this is not the first time you've had grandparents raise a child, is it?
No.
Even if mom was being disruptive or causing a problem, that was Mr. Horner's base was his grandparents.
That's right.
And I think you talked about his grandma. You described her as a lovely woman. Is that right?
She's very lovely.
And I think you described grandfather as a little more rough. I think that was your word.
Rough, cranky. Yeah,
Cranky.
that was Bill.
Kind of a get off my lawn kind of guy.
Yeah.
Is that what you're talking about?
Yep.
And given his military experience and where he had been in the world, did you blame him for being rough?
Not at all.
Because you remember even a going through this, and we're talking about Tanner, you at least attempted for the time you were with him to teach him those skills that we saw up on the board.
Yes, sir.
Now let me ask you this. You also said that you taught him manners, right? And you appreciated his good manners. I think that's right, wasn't it?
I don't know if I said I taught him manners or not, but I taught him how to behave, was trying to get into his head how we behave in public.
Right. And I think you said that he was a yes sir, no sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am.
Absolutely, but he came to me like that.
So he had some pre-training on how to act.
Yes,
But you also said he had the ability, when he had done something wrong, to say he was sorry.
that's right.
Now, this particular case, what you said,
That's exactly what I said.
and I guess I need to know, is that he shouldn't have been trusted to be in that truck alone.
Right. And that's not to say that he couldn't do that job and do it well. That's to say, when circumstances don't follow the norm for him, cognitively, he can't. What he is, just fix it. Let's just fix this. And sometimes his fix is worse than the problem.
Right. And what's your understanding of what he initially did to Athena Strand that precipitated?
I don't know. Hit her with the truck some way.
And that's why you're saying that he shouldn't have been alone in the truck.
That's
You're
right.
understanding that he hit her with the truck.
That's right. Think about it. If another adult had been in that vehicle with him, the outcome would have more than likely been very different, and we'd still have little Athena.
You understand, if the fact is that he did not hit her with that truck, that creates a whole different situation.
He didn't.
If the evidence is that he did not hit her with that truck, and that did not happen, as you understand it, that changes your opinion on things, doesn't it?
Well, it doesn't change my opinion, because my opinion will always be he should have had another adult in the car with him, in the vehicle with him. What it does, it makes me wonder what the whole thing was about. Why?
And you're not telling us today that his autism had anything to do with the criminal offense in this case.
But the outcome, you're going to have to ask that a
Yeah,
different
I
way.
mean, are you saying that his autism caused him to kidnap and murder this child?
No, I'm saying it did not.
That's what you're
Read, read.
Very briefly, Your Honor.
Oh, no.
Beth, I only have that many questions, okay? Do you think that Tanner would have been able to make the changes that you noted without intervention?
No, I don't.
Do you think he would have been able to maintain those changes that you saw over the 1 year that you dealt with him without continued intervention from someone like you?
It would certainly be a disruption in his ability to carry on with it, yes.
When the state asked you about teaching Tanner the ability to know right from wrong, were you talking about his ability to make the right decision in problem solving?
Yes,
And does that go back to his inability to foresee his consequences or the consequences?
exactly.
That was 4 questions, so I still have 1, but I'm going to give that time back to the judge. I have no further questions.
Mr. State,
Nothing further.
may this witness be excused.
No objections, Your Honor.
You're done.
I'm done. Well, I can't
What's that?
say I enjoyed it, but y'all have a good day.
What's your step?
All right.
Let me see, counsel.
For me, I'm Dr. Jeffrey David Lewine. I am a neuroscientist by training, so I'm an expert on the brain.
Can you, tell me a little bit more about the neuroscientist?
Yeah, so I do have some slides here, but it's not working. Just ignore these for the moment. Just listen to me. They're mostly for me. So neuroscience is the study of the brain, the spinal cord, and the nerves in health and disease. And it includes everything from the basic biology of individual brain cells to how brain cells are interconnected to form networks that support things like memory, attention, the emotional regulation of behavior, to clinical aspects of neuroscience. So how when the brain is damaged, that manifests as disease or injury. And then finally, the techniques that we use to look at the brain. So things like magnetic resonance imaging, MRI, PET imaging, something known as positron emission tomography, and also electroencephalography, EEG. These are all methods that we can use to give us insights into the structure and function of the brain.
Let's talk a little bit about your qualifications to do that type of work and to give those opinions. What's your education background?
Yeah, so I actually have bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees in neuroscience from the University of Rochester in upstate New York. I was then a postdoctoral fellow in neuroscience and biophysics at Los Alamos National Laboratory. They got lots of people working on bombs and things, but they actually have a very large biology group, and neuroscience was part of that.
And are there particular areas of neuroscience that you study?
Yeah, so I am generally recognized for my work in different types of imaging technologies. So again, MRI, PET, EEG. I do work on a number of conditions, most notably autism spectrum disorders, traumatic brain injury, epilepsy, and post-traumatic stress disorder.
And where do you currently work?
So I wear lots of different hats depending on what day you find me. So I am the Chief Executive and Chief Scientific Officer of the Center for Advanced Diagnostics, Evaluation, and Therapeutics, located in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Cadet is involved in the development and evaluation of new diagnostic tools and new therapies for autism, PTSD, and traumatic brain injury. I'm also the CEO of Neuroscience Expert Consulting Services of America. That is the small business that is involved in legal work, in this case here. I am an affiliate professor of translational neuroscience at the Mind Research Network, also in Albuquerque. MRN was established by a $60 million grant from the United States Congress to look at brain structure and function in health and disease, especially psychiatric disorders. I have faculty appointments in neurology and psychology at the University of New Mexico. And I'm also the director of research for a small pharmaceutical company, Beyond Barrier Therapeutics, where we're developing and testing new therapies for traumatic brain injury and something known as organophosphate poisoning.
Are you a medical doctor?
So I'm not a medical doctor, I'm a PhD.
So you're not here to specify the diagnosis for Mr. Horner. You pick a physician like a doctor would do.
That's correct. So I don't do diagnosis. I'm involved in treatment, but I don't do direct treatment. I don't prescribe medication. I don't do diagnoses for individuals.
Okay, so for this case, I'm here to use your expertise as a brain scientist, for lack of a better word, to talk about standard terms.
Yeah, I was explicitly asked to use the technologies that are available in neuroscience to get an understanding as best as possible of Tanner's brain structure, brain function, and to, based on putting that within the historical context of the information we have on him, to try and understand what might have caused these abnormalities in brain structure and function.
And is there any kind of independent evidence that you're qualified to integrate the types of information that we talked about you're saying?
Yeah, so I do this type of integration of methods on a daily basis. I have had faculty appointments at numerous universities throughout the country. I've had appointments in the Department of Radiology, appointments in neurology, psychiatry, psychology, even electrical engineering and computer science. So I've got a very broad background in neuroscience and integrating various different types of information.
And you present your research at scientific meetings?
Yeah, so I have done invited presentations at more than 100 different national and international scientific meetings.
What about publications? Have you been published?
Yeah, so I've got over 75 peer-reviewed publications. I'm the co-author of a textbook on functional brain imaging.
And how is your work funded?
So my work is predominantly funded through research grants. So I've had funding from the Department of Defense, National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health. I currently have a $2 million contract with Special Operations Command of the Department of Defense for developing and evaluating a new therapy for traumatic brain injury. And just earlier this week, I submitted an application to the Advanced Research and Project Agency for Health for $40 million to examine post-traumatic stress disorder.
Do you do mostly legal work?
So legal work is about 40 to 50% of my effort. Mostly I'm involved in doing these grant types of things. Again, evaluating new therapies, developing new therapies. I do some legal work. It's split between civil work and criminal work like this. About 60% is civil work. 40% of that is the criminal work.
So you ever testified as a neuroscience expert in court before?
Yeah, so I testified to my neuroscientific opinions.
I don't want things being displayed here that are not in evidence.
Okay.
Okay.
Skip that.
Okay. Again, this is stuff that's not admitted into evidence. I mean, there's stuff on board here that is not admitted into evidence.
I think all of that would be on his CV, so we can go ahead and present that part.
Will you have any objection?
Well, I mean, it was shown to me, and I wasn't really understanding exactly where they were going with this. None of this is in evidence. And I guess it depends on what they're offering it for.
Well, it appears to be a PowerPoint presentation.
Yes.
So do you have, you've seen it?
I've seen it.
Do you have any objections?
Well, my objections would be to anything in it that's obviously hearsay, and if it goes to his opinions that are expert in nature outside of his expertise, I'd also object to it on that basis. But
All right, y'all return to your. Everyone may see, I didn't mean to cut you off, but I mean, he's clicking the deals and I'm like, wait, what's going on? So,
Well, the other experts had introduced the CV first, and that's not here, is would be depending on the CV so far.
well, but I mean, he's testifying and like this, I've been recently awarded 1.5 million from the Special Operations Command. He's not testifying. I mean, we got stuff up here on the jury that the jury's reading that he's not testifying to, and I want to clear that up. So with this PowerPoint presentation, is there anything in here that the state is going to object to? I mean, I'm gonna let him testify to it, but I don't want it being shown to the jury as an exhibit.
That's the last screen with anything about his career.
Okay.
The rest of it is the materials that we provided yesterday and today.
Okay.
His finding, it's based on the radiology report, Dr. Bono, and the PET scan, and the EEG scan, and then the quantitative analysis that Juan did himself.
Okay.
Well, some of the stuff, I mean, we didn't go over all this stuff in the 705, if I remember correctly, but there's stuff in here about as to what his toxic exposure is, what it's from, his neurodevelopmental disorders, which he can't diagnose, that comes from somebody else.
Well, but I'm assuming he relied upon the other reports that have been testified to. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's right, but he's not able to make any form of diagnosis and make any conclusions that Mr. Horner is suffering from any of these. He doesn't have that ability.
Well, that's already been testified to, so he can rely upon it.
Yeah, I mean, if it's going to be, are they offering just to be demonstrative, to just show certain things? Are we trying to admit it actually into evidence? What we,
This is just demonstrative evidence. We have his 3 reports, we're gonna move to the interim, we have the CV, it's already been entered into the record, we're gonna move to interconference.
Okay.
And
Do you have
then
any objection to that?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I had no intention of putting in every, well, I mean, the image this is gonna use. I think the report itself probably contains.
As long as we're going to introduce it so the jury can have it, if they deliberate, I'm good
I'll do
with
the
it.
next thing.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
All right, sorry.
Demonstrative, I'm going to say demonstrative only on this as far as the power.
Yeah, this is demonstrative only. I don't intend to just go back to the jury. That's why I supplied it to.
But we will mark it, we'll introduce it for purposes of the record.
We absolutely.
Okay, I'm good.
I just want to make sure I understand. So, information about toxic exposures that's in reports that I have read, am I allowed to?
I would
it's-
next ask you to identify these, will be your 3 reports and your CV.
And that came from Dr.
This is the one.
Speck. correct?
Yes.
Okay. You can rely upon Speck because he has testified in front of the jury.
So Dr. Davies has not testified yet. He did a formal report. Am I allowed to talk about his
Get one that we
observations?
just said about. Okay.
You are allowed to testify that you received a report from Dr. Davies, but don't go into the report. Okay?
Would that include anything that he's going to testify as potential conditions and results with regard to the defendant that you took into consideration to make it, I mean.
You may testify that you received a report from Dr. Davies that you relied upon, but do not go into anything involving the contents of Dr. Davies' report.
No, but from his perspective, he had, from his neuroscience perspective, he will be able to say that his results are consistent with FASD, ASD, those things, did not talk about Davies' the same.
I'll let him do that.
And am I allowed to indicate that Dr. Davies' report indicated that there was likely alcohol?
No, you're going into the report. Okay?
And some of that's on this.
Well, that's just for demonstrative purposes. So it'll all tie up. So let's go.
Does that make sense?
All right, let's go.
I'm just gonna start here.
That's fine.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Let's make it do this in an hour. Well, I just wanted all that to say, you know, like I just.
We're good. All right, everyone may be seated. We're ready to proceed, Mr. Coates.
Dr. Wine, is the fifth exhibit 50 a true and accurate copy of your CV?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, that was previously admitted to the record, I move now to admit for all purposes.
Any objection?
No objection to
State's Exhibit 50 is admitted for all purposes.
Dr. Lewines, defendant's exhibit 71, a true and correct copy of your MRI report.
It's the brain integrity check MRI report, correct?
Here, I move to admit that.
I'm sorry.
I would move to admit that report.
71, any objection?
No objection.
All right, Defense Exhibit 71 is admitted.
Dr. Lewines, Defense Exhibit 72, a true and accurate copy of the EEG, MEG physiology report.
Yes, in this case, it's just EEG, so BIC EEG report.
Your Honor, I move to admit Defense Exhibit 72 at this time.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Defendant's Exhibit 72 is admitted.
Dr. Lewines, Defense Exhibit 73, a true and accurate copy of the PET report.
It's my PET report, correct?
Your Honor, I move to admit Defendant's Exhibit 73.
Any objection?
None, Your
Defense Exhibit 73 is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, one more question. Dr. Lewine, did you review any other materials or records in preparing your report or preparing your testimony?
Yeah, so I reviewed extensive records and also a number of expert reports.
I believe I was asking you if you had testified in court before, and you answered that. Have you ever testified in criminal cases in Texas?
Yes, on numerous occasions.
And I believe we have a PowerPoint presentation that we're going to be using to help explain your testimony to the jury.
Yes, I'm going to go down here and go to a little bit, Professor, over here for a little bit. The pointer doesn't work very well, so it's a little bit easier. Down here, can you all hear me okay? Perfect, thank you.
All right, so can you start by giving us a little tutorial on neuroscience, what the relationship is between brain structure, the functioning, and behavior?
Yeah, and so in order to understand what we're seeing in different imaging techniques, I need to give you kind of a little quick tutorial on the brain, how the brain works. And so the brain really is the basis of all complex behavior. It controls how we interact with the world. It controls how we interact with each other. And when we think about the brain, so the brain is composed of different types of cells. The most important one are the neurons. So the neurons are the computational units of the brain. And they basically have three parts to them. They have the cell body, which is the command center. They have the dendrites, which is how signals get into the neuron. Then they have the axon, which is how signals get out to the neuron, the next cell. And so the cells are basically interconnected with a little space here known as the synapse. And your brain has about 80 billion brain cells in it, 80 billion neurons, and about 100 trillion synapses. Okay? So it's an extraordinarily complex system. And again, it's got the computational units, the cell bodies, and they reside in what's known as the gray matter. And then they have the axons, which interconnect to different cells. That's what's known as the white matter. And so you're going to hear about me talk about gray matter and white matter as we go on. And sir, I apologize, that is my glucose sensor alarm going off, and I thought I turned it off, but I didn't.
No, you're fine.
Just let it be?
Yeah.
Okay.
Or can you turn it off?
I can't turn it off.
Why don't you go turn it off?
Okay, my apologies. I thought I got it.
It's been one of those mornings.
I agree.
Thank you, sir. My apologies.
Yes, sir. Mr. Vogel, you may continue.
Dr. White, can you pick up where you left off?
So again, so there's the computational units, there's the interconnections between them. And so if you damage the gray matter and computational units, or you damage the white matter interconnections, that's going to disrupt function. And so, for example, the brain actually has some degree of specialization. There are certain parts of the brain that are mostly responsible for visual information processing, other parts of the brain that are involved in auditory processing. And then there are networks in the brain. So the part of your brain that understands language is in the left temporal lobe. The part of your brain that actually lets you talk and communicate is in the left frontal lobe. So those are where the computational units are, and then there's axons, white matter pathways, that interconnect those parts of the brain just like the telephone wires. So if you damage either the left temporal lobe, the left frontal lobe, or the interconnections, you get a disruption in language function.
When you talk about language networks, are there other networks of the brain?
So there are many, many other networks. There are networks for controlling memory. There are networks for doing things like recognizing faces. There are networks for controlling emotion and regulating behavior. And there are also networks in the brain that support what we call social cognition. So this is just a caricature with the areas in yellow showing those parts of the brain that are involved in social cognition. Social cognition is your ability to interact with other people, to recognize their face, to recognize their emotions, to communicate effectively with them, to have empathy for someone. Something known as theory of mind, which is your ability to understand what someone else is thinking. All of those things are controlled by the brain, controlled by specific parts of the brain, interacting with each other.
And is everyone's brain the same?
So, no, everybody's brain, there's a general organization, but the fine details are different. So my brain has basically the same general area in the back of the head that's involved in visual information processing as your area. But my brain is wired a little bit differently than your brain.
Okay, so does that mean that people perceive and interact with the world in different ways because the ways their brains are different?
Yeah, so there are a couple of things that are important. So one thing to keep in mind is that the brain develops. So the brain you were born with is not the brain will do anything. And there are many, many factors that influence your brain development. Your genetics is important. The environment. In we call a toxic stress environment. There's not enough food. There's violence. Toxic exposures, alcohol, drug abuse, all of those things, psychiatric disease, and things like head trauma. And so as the world. So I don't know if any of this yellow and white, blue and black, but about a third will see this as blue and black. And my daughter's like, Dad, you're crazy. That is white. That is blue and black. I'm like, no, it's not. It's white and gold. It has to do with the way that my brain wired itself to perceive color and the location of light sources. Much to my chagrin, the actual fibers of the dress are blue and black. I'm misperceiving. That with the world is a function of how your brain is developed. And if neurotypical people can have such widely different perceptions, imagine what happens when we put brain injury and dysfunction on top of that. So how you perceive the world, how you interact with the world is a function of how your brain is wired and functioning.
Okay, so what factors influence how your brain develops and how it gets wired?
So again, there are all of these different factors that influence things. And so anytime we start to look at brain damage, we start to think about brain dysfunction, and we want to try and understand what the potential causes are, we need to look at all of these different factors.
Now let's talk about Tanner specifically. Can you tell me about some of the things that you've reviewed in his history and records that have at least the potential to disrupt the brain structure and function from your point of view?
So one of the things that I do is I go back and look at medical records, school records, jail records, trying to identify all the things that we know of that potentially cause disruption in brain function. And there are a lot of those, and I try to identify the ones that may be relevant in a particular case, in this case for Tanner. And so based on these reports that I reviewed, there are certain things that are in the literature there. So he potentially had some toxic exposures. There's some records which suggest that there may have been some fetal alcohol exposure. There are records that indicate that he had this toxic stress, that he grew up in an environment that wasn't the ideal environment for raising a child. You've heard a little bit about that. You're going to hear more about that. He has what we believe are some neurodevelopmental disorders. So you've heard a lot about autism spectrum disorders. And so autism spectrum disorders really are a spectrum. So I do a lot of work with kids with autism. Some of these kids are completely nonverbal, don't make any eye contact.
I'm gonna object. This is an extending narrative without any form of question, and it's not responsive as well to the particular
All right,
question.
so saying, let's keep the question and answer as much as we can.
Yes, sir. So as part of your work in identifying neurodevelopmental disorders from a neuroscience perspective, have you worked with patients who have radiation?
Yes, so I extensively work with individuals with both autism spectrum disorders and ADHD. And in the records, there's indication that those are present for Mr. Horner. There's
Hang on,
And
question.
is head trauma another area that you would look at for Mr. Horner based on his records?
So there's indications that there may have been some head traumas, not well documented in medical records. But again, I consider head trauma as a possibility for something that might disrupt brain structure and function.
And as a neuroscientist, how do you go about evaluating brain structure and function?
So there are a number of techniques that we use. One of the primary ones is something known as magnetic resonance imaging, MRI. So MRI is a technique for looking predominantly at brain structure. There's a big donut-shaped magnet. So you slide somebody into the magnet, and then you actually pulse at them little radio frequencies. And the system listens for the radio frequency signals that come back. And those signals that
The bottom type of images you get from that MRI?
yeah, so these are not tandem sequences. You can get different types of images. These are what are known as T1 images. They're very good for showing the anatomy. There's something known as DTI, diffusion tensor imaging, which tells us about the white matter interconnections. And one thing that I want to make sure everybody understands. So this isn't like taking a photograph. This is measuring magnetic signals that are coming back from the brain and reconstructing these images. So it's a mathematical computational thing. It's not like snapping the picture. There are standard ways on how these signals get reconstructed or represented in terms of what the images look like.
And these are the standard ways. So this is a technology that's widely used in clinical and research and scientific applications.
Yeah, so almost every hospital in the United States has an MRI scanner. They all produce basically the same types of images. Not all scanners have the capabilities for diffusion tensor imaging, but they can all certainly do these types of T1 images.
Admitted to courts across the U.S.
Yes, sir.
Did you do an MRI on Tanner?
Yeah, so the MRI was actually done at the MRI center. I personally, about a year ago, set up the protocols on the scanner to collect these data. This is just an example of one of the images that comes from Hannah's brain. This is known as a sagittal slice, so it's in this direction here. We're a little bit off to the midline. The MRI data that were collected, there were two types of particular relevance in this case. The one images, which were used for something known as volumetrics, and the visual inspection of these images by the neuroradiologist is that they're within normal limits. So the neuroradiologist, just looking at the images, says there are no gross abnormalities here. There's no tumors. There's not a hole in the head. There's not multiple sclerosis.
Okay, let's back up for a second. So you set protocols, kind of telling what you need the MRI to do, correct?
Correct.
And then a medical doctor, I believe this is the Dr. Yon, signs an order for the MRI tech to do it. And then back in the MRI tech to run the machine. You're not running the machine off.
Correct.
And then they give you the data from it.
Correct.
And you're saying that a normal radiologist reads it and says, when you say there's no gross abnormalities.
Judge, I'll object as a leading.
Let me hear the question.
I'm sorry, I thought you already said that the radiologist said there was no gross abnormalities. What did the radiologist find?
The radiologist did not indicate any gross structural abnormalities in Tanner's brain.
And we're using the term gross like in terms of a large scale. What do we mean there?
What you can see on visual inspection.
And that's what you said. Visually, you can look at it. He saw no tumor, no holes in the brain. Those sort of things.
That is correct.
So, what volumetrics are?
So one of the challenges with MRI is in children with autism spectrum disorders, even very severe autism, MRI shows things in less than 10%. In mild traumatic brain injury, MRI visually shows less than 10%. Over the last 2 decades are what are known as quantitative methods. One of those is a quantitative method known as volumetrics, where we actually measure the size of different brain areas. This is done by a computer. And then the values for the client are compared with average values from a normative database. So just you have your blood work done, and they come back and say, hey, your white cell count is done. That's comparing.
You talked about using a normative database. Now, first of all, you said volume, and for a layperson, you're really talking about the size of each part of the brain.
That is correct.
And then you said a normative database. Explain how you create that. What that is.
So again, so the normative database is created by MRI images from people without any history of head trauma, neurological disorder, psychiatric disorder, learning disabilities. And so for the work that I do, we're able to compare Tanner's data with a normative database that has about 10,000 people. Now from that, we extract only the male subjects who are within 5 years of age, but it's a very large database. And so we can look at the results, hey, this is within normal limits, or this value is too big, or this value is too low. And we can do in this case, is at the time we did the scan, I think Tanner was 33 years old, male subject. That's the only information that it has. So it's a very objective, mathematical, statistical way to determine whether or not they're abnormal.
And it's making a comparison between his brain, his values, and neurotypical people within 5 years of age, is that above or below?
Yes,
And that are male.
correct.
Okay.
And so again, so it's a statistical comparison. So this is just showing a subset here. So the open circles are the values for the database, the neurotypical subjects. So if Tanner's value is here in green, right smack in the middle, that's within normal limits. If his value is very large compared to the database, that's outside of limits, it is very small. And we describe how abnormal things are using a statistical measure, something known as a z-score, which basically tells you how abnormal things are.
Okay, and what did Tanner's MRI show?
So Tanner's volumetrics show that things are mostly within normal. There's one particular area in the brain, the left orbital frontal area, that is abnormally low. His value is about 20% lower than what you see in neurotypical subjects. That translates into about 50 million fewer neurons. And again, this year, this underlying brain, this is a caricature based on the calculations. I'm the one who put these colors on and chose the color. So okay, the way you get those colors is the science, and that is standardized. That's how we do it for everybody.
Now, so you're saying that it indicated that you likely had a volume loss, and you're using this to show which part of the brain that would be in. And what does that part of the brain normally do?
And so the left orbital frontal cortex is one of these key brain regions involved in the emotional regulation of behavior and social cognition. is often disrupted in autism spectrum disorders. Again, that's based on the scientific literature. It can be disrupted in traumatic brain injury. It can also be disrupted in depression.
Accepted in clinical.
So volumetrics is an extremely well-accepted technique. It is supported by over 5,000 publications. It is routinely used in hospitals throughout the United States. In the clinical world, it is used mostly in the evaluation of epilepsy and Alzheimer's disease, but it's seen increasing usage in traumatic brain injury. And certainly in the forensic world, we see it being used very commonly with respect to psychiatric conditions, things like depression, schizophrenia, and autism spectrum disorder.
Okay, let me move on to I think you said you use another technique called diffusion tensor imaging. What is that?
So diffusion tensor imaging, it's still an MRI technique. It's just a different way of pulsing those radio frequency fields to emphasize different characteristics. In particular, the characteristics it emphasizes look at how water is diffusing in the extracellular space. And so remember we talked about axons. So axons travel in bundles. Because they travel in bundles, water within the brain moves along the axons as opposed to across them. And so we can use something a measure known as fractional anisotropy, FA, to tell us about the integrity of the axons. And so just like we did with the volumetrics, the computer is going to calculate the FA values, in this case for 33 different fiber tracts, and compare the values for Tanner.
What is the DTI for Tanner show?
So the DTI for Tanner shows that most of his fiber tracts look to be intact.
Hold on 1 second here, and tell me about the images. These are the computer images, or you've added color to help us understand.
So these are the images. So the underlying brain here is just a generic one. The color codes here are showing the tractography. So this is the computer's reconstruction of the fiber tracts in Tanner's brain. The color assignment, again, is very, very standard, not something I do, comes out of the computer algorithm. The different colors are telling you about the direction that the fibers are moving in, whether they're going front to back, up, down, or across. And then again, the computer extracts these FA values, compares it to the normative database, tells us whether they're normal, whether they're high, whether they're low. These blue boxes indicate that those fiber tracts had FA values that were abnormally low, in the lowest 5th percentile.
Okay, explain start with what track we're talking about and what they control. Those values you tell us.
Yeah, so in particular, Mr. Horner has low FA values for what are known as the right and left fornix. This is a fiber tract that's very important in short-term memory. And the low FA values indicate that there's a disruption in the structure of the fornix.
Did you tell us what the fornix? What did you say?
So the fornix is predominantly involved in short-term memory.
Right. Now, the TTI, is that a technique that only you were using, or is that also common in clinical and research and scientific
I
settings?
think this is also a common technique. Diffusion tensor imaging is supported by several thousand publications. Tractography is routinely used by hospitals in planning surgery for people with brain tumors and epilepsy. These types of quantitative analyses aren't too often used in the hospital because they don't change medical care, but they're routinely used in forensic and research settings to understand whether or not there is evidence of white matter dysfunction, or white matter disruption in conditions like autism, like traumatic brain injury, like substance use.
Now, I think you explained that volumetrics and the DTI are looking at brain functioning and how we do that.
Yeah, so looking at structure is one thing, but it's only part of the story. So if you take a group of people with autism spectrum disorders, the volumetric, the function of the brain to understand more of what's going on. One of those technologies is something known as electroencephalography. So your brain cells work using electrical currents. So when your brain cells are active using this on Tanner, what comes out from the EEG is a bunch of squiggly lines. These lines are showing how the electrical potential is changing in time at each location. We record from 19 different places over there.
And are you doing interpretation on that, or is this a computer?
So this is a computer analysis again. So one of the things that can be done with these signals, so if you have a very complicated squiggly line, you can describe the complicated line by a combination of simpler signals. We basically look at how fast the squiggles are and how big the squiggles are. So the computer can take the actual data and calculate how much what we call power there is in each frequency. Power relates to how big the signals are. And so we get values for Tanner for power at different frequencies at each electrode. Just like we did with the MRI, we can compare that with a normative database.
Now, we can back up for 1 second there. You put up there these different gamma, beta, alpha, theta? What are we talking about there?
So we generally describe, again, the signals by how fast they are. So delta refers to squiggles that are very slow, so between 1 to 4 per second. Beta refers to much faster signals in the range of 20 to 40 per second. And these different types of signals are associated with different types of activity. So delta activity in particular is associated with very significant brain dysfunction. You should not have a lot of delta activity in somebody who's awake. Beta signals are associated with brain hyperexcitability. We see that in anxiety disorders. We see that in autism spectrum disorders. We see that in post-traumatic stress disorders. So by looking at the different frequencies in the scientific literature, abnormal and what is related to.
EEG is also a technique that's commonly used clinically, forensically, scientifically.
Yeah, so again, in the clinic, it's used predominantly to look at epilepsy and sleep disorders. Quantitative metrics are used in ICUs to look at epilepsy and stroke. These types of quantitative analyses are also used clinically in guiding a therapy known as neurofeedback. That's typically done more by psychologists as opposed to medical doctors, but still clinical work using these technologies.
And the Q up there, that's for quantitative.
Yes.
And that's just kind of another way of analyzing an EEG.
Yes, so the EEG is the basic data, QEEG is the quantification of the data.
Let's move on, and I think you're going to tell us how Tanner shows that.
Yeah, so I just need to tell you a little bit more about how we represent the data. And again, this comes from the computer. It's the same for everybody. The computer doesn't know whose brain it is. These are what are known as the power maps. So these are looking at the different frequencies. So again, delta are very slow frequencies, beta are faster frequencies. It's a very light green color. It means it's within normal limits. And this is not Tanner's brain. This is just a representation here. This particular case had a stroke in the right hemisphere. And so this individual has lots of abnormally increased theta power. That's what the red color is. Again, computers assigning these colors. These are standardized. This is using FDA cleared software for these analyses. There's another measure we can do, something known as coherence, which basically looks at the interconnections between brain areas. And so we do those types of analyses. And so I'm going to show you Tanner's data in a second here. Let me just show you a typical control subject. So even a control subject, because you're making lots and lots of measurements, may have a couple of scattered abnormalities. Okay? That's common. It's known as the problem of multiple comparisons. You can get some false positive things. We have statistical methods for dealing with that. So here's just an example of a control subject. Here's what we actually find for Tanner. So Tanner has very significant increased theta activity all the way through delta and high beta activity over the left hemisphere of his brain. He's got some minor disruptions in coherence. They're actually not that bad, but his baseline brain rhythms are not neurotypical. They show significant abnormalities. One of the other analyses that we can do is to actually figure out where in the brain things are coming from. And again, this is all done by a computer, using FDA cleared software. This is looking at how abnormal the currents are and where those abnormalities are coming from. This is a generic locations of the abnormalities come from the data from Tanner. And he shows in particular abnormal theta activity and abnormal high beta activity over the left hemisphere, temporal lobe, parietal lobe, a little bit of the frontal lobe.
And what can we learn from that?
So what these data are indicating are, so that the theta is indicating that there's some general brain dysfunction. Increased theta activity is often associated with traumatic brain injury. You can also see it in other psychiatric conditions. High beta activity is very consistent with an autism spectrum disorder. Now, you cannot, and I can't look at the EEG in isolation and say, aha, this is autism. Okay? These are not diagnostic techniques in that sense. They're supplemental information. These are patterns that are consistent with the presence of autism spectrum disorder that has been diagnosed by people other than myself.
So you're looking at the brain. You know the brain controls behavior, can give you information on other psychiatric or developmental disorders that you're not diagnosing solely based on this.
That's correct.
Okay, and what about, we talked about this is QEEG is routinely used in clinical forensic and research settings.
That is correct.
Okay. And what about a PET scan? Was PET scan done in this one?
Yeah, so the last imaging technique,
First of all, what's PET stand for?
so PET stands for positron emission tomography. So when your brain cells are active, they require glucose. Glucose is the energy the brain cells use. And so PET is a way of looking at metabolism and blood flow within the brain. You actually inject the radioactive glucose, and then the PET scanner images how that glucose is distributed. It does it in conjunction with a CT scan, which is kind of a very fancy X-ray to give you some structural information. So you get the CT structural information, you get the PET information. And I'm just going to show you some things, and I want to be careful to explain this if I may. So the images that get sent to me from the are generally black and white and gray images. They don't have any color. There are standard color palettes that are applied to those data that just help to emphasize some things. So that's what the blue and the purples are, to just tell how much metabolic activity there is. So blue is low metabolic activity, yellow is high metabolic activity. Just as we did for the MRI, just as we did for the EEG, the computer algorithms go ahead and calculate whether the values for Tanner are normal or abnormal relative to the norm in the database. And then the computer goes ahead and puts these blobs on. So these blobs are not inherently images. These represent the computer calculations, but they are identifying areas that are abnormal. In this particular case, Tanner has,
Before we get to that, one second. Sorry, I missed the legal. So the PET scan, you said that was another one where there has to be, you did a doctor's order, you set up the protocols, an actual tech to do the PET scan to the PET scan.
that's correct.
Okay, and then was there a separate reading on that?
So there was not a formal reading. The imaging center tells me if there's anything grossly abnormal on the PET. They did not tell me anything that was grossly abnormal. So the clinical read of the PET scan is within normal limits.
And that is that once again talking about the same thing. We're looking for the big issues, hospital issues.
Yeah, for looking at tumors, for looking at Alzheimer's dementia, you don't see gross things on PET in general in psychiatric.
And then you get the data, the computer does its magic science here, and now that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, and so the data actually come to me. I actually send it to a company that does these analyses. So it's like a blood test, gets sent off to a lab. The lab sends you back the results, and then I interpret those results from a neuroscientific perspective.
Okay, so now can you go ahead and proceed with interpretation? All right.
So he has a number of areas which are known as hypometabolism. So these are areas of abnormally low activity. And again, the computer is putting on the color codes here. These are standardized codes. This is how they're always used. I don't choose the color. Tanner shows hypometabolism in several areas of the brain, including the orbital frontal cortex, right and left, including parts of the right temporal lobe. He also shows abnormally high metabolism, overactivity. And overactivity is just as bad as underactivity. He shows that in particular in the back of the brain, in a part of the brain known as the cuneus. And then so one of the things that I have done is taken that information and just for ease of display, color-coded onto a demonstrative map. So blue is showing areas that are hypometabolic, red is showing areas that are overactive.
Now you mentioned the cuneus there. You mentioned that before. What is that area of the brain?
So the cuneus is actually predominantly involved in visual information processing, but it's also involved in social cognition. In particular, things like empathy, and again, this thing known as theory of mind, understanding what somebody else is thinking.
Now we pre-submitted the 3 reports on these 3 techniques you talked about. How would you put them all together? What's that indicate to you?
So when you put everything together, you basically get this. So the left orbital frontal area is actually abnormal on both the MRI and the PET scan. He's got a number of abnormalities on the PET. So right temporal, bilateral, cuneus is overactive. And he's got this general dysfunction in the left hemisphere gleaned mostly from the east. It's not uncommon that there's only partial overlap between the two. But across these techniques, he has evidence of either structural and or functional disruption in many, many areas of the brain.
Okay, and can you, and what do these parts of the brain do, and what does all that mean?
So remember that we talked earlier on about this social cognition network, the parts of the brain that let you interact with people. He has wide overlaps between his areas of abnormalities and the social network. So dysfunction, in this case, PET abnormalities in the right temporal lobe, abnormalities in the cuneus, abnormalities in orbital frontal cortex. So he has very extensive overlap with the social cognition network. He has lots of the nodes that aren't functioning properly. You actually need only one node to be damaged to get dysfunction. And so the overall profile here is an indication of objective brain evidence of dysfunction in the social cognitive networks of the brain. From a functional perspective, and a neuroscientist, that is most consistent with his history of an autism spectrum disorder. It's not to say that there aren't contributions from other factors like the ADHD, like the toxic exposures, but this pattern is most consistent with social disruption and ADHD.
And can you summarize your overall opinion and what you think are responsible for the abnormality?
Yeah, so kind of as I just said, he has disruption in EEG, MRI, PET, which collectively show dysfunction and structural disruption in the networks that support emotional regulation, behavior, and social cognition, a little bit in some of the memory system. The right temporal lobe, very important for pragmatic language. This is kind of understanding the nuances of language. So he's not, based on the imaging, he's got disruption in those networks. Again, profile most consistent with autism spectrum disorder. other things might be contributing to this. It's my understanding that Mr. Horner does have a history of some substance use, mostly marijuana, but also some cocaine and hallucinogens. This particular profile is not a good match for those things. It's not to say he hasn't done those things. It's just to say there's not evidence in this particular set of data that his exposure to those substances have caused major permanent brain damage. It's really the autism spectrum disorder that goes hand in hand with these particular findings.
Thank you, Dr. Lyon. You're on passing.
Okay, let's break for lunch. It's on its way. It should be here in about 5 minutes. So we will start back up at 1:15. Okay, see you then.
Data that his exposure to those substances have caused major permanent.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Cody, I struggle with all this testimony this morning. It's hard to listen to. But before we talk about brain scan guy, you know, one of the things that people have really been upset about in the comments is a lot of laughter in that courtroom.
Yeah, the laughter is just not. I mean, you know, maybe one a free pass, a witness becomes uncomfortable. Whoever, I think her name was Beth, the speech
Right, the
pathologist,
speech, yeah.
who was also a quasi-autistic expert somehow. It's one thing to have nerves if you're a new witness from the top.
But we're
you know,
making jokes.
Sure, I mean that's unacceptable. And so, you know, at some point, I mean, maybe the prosecutor just says something, a little sidebar. The judge says, "Okay, let's level this out," because it does become uncomfortable for the jurors, and especially when the witnesses
Has to be.
Yeah, and she's looking at the jury, and so they're assuming they're awake still. They're looking at her like, "Why are we still laughing again?" This here we are again. This beautiful young girl. That's the last image. Her family, who's sitting in that courtroom, is ever going to see.
Yeah.
And then these people are laughing. I mean, levity is going to happen at some point, at some juncture. Something might be said or seen, but you've really got to dial this back. Any of the lawyers just say, "Hey, relax. All right, let's stick to the game plan here. We're kind of getting off script, like a lot of these witnesses. You know, letting them just run wild in the courtroom. Like this guy is going to be a summary witness. It looks like for another hour at his pace."
Yeah, we're far from done. We got Rebecca is on the line. Rebecca Lopez, our senior crime and justice reporter. Rebecca, me and Cody and I are struggling with this brain. Well, I'm calling him brain scan guy.
Yeah, you know, I heard his testimony before when we had the hearings, when they were doing the voir dire on these witnesses before the jury got here. And I will tell you that the way that the prosecution is going to come back at this witness is they're going to question his credentials to even really talk about this, because they're like, "You are not a doctor. Are you a doctor? No, you're a scientist, you're a PhD, but you are not a doctor that actually diagnoses autism." And so they're going to question a little bit of his credibility and how he reached these conclusions and his interpretation of these scans. And at the end of the day, again, they're going to ask him, but did all of this cause him to be violent? Because don't other people that have this, that are on the autism spectrum, even if you believe what he is saying, commit these horrendous crimes and such a horrific crime against a 7-year-old girl? And he's going to have to say, well, no, you know, they don't do this. And again, the way that he's describing the brain scans, it's like it's really not abnormal. Just I think he says it's like 20% off in some areas of his brain, and so it's almost like they're struggling to find some sort of CTE or something that has caused this sort of reaction from Tanner Horner, something that you really cannot tell unless you actually dissect somebody's brain. Because you remember they're talking about how he's banging his head, and he might have had some sort of trauma in his. You know, when he's banging his head against the wall or banging his head with his fist, did he have some sort of traumatic brain injuries that would have caused him to have some kind of CTE sort of thing? But they don't really get there with this particular witness, because again, he is not a doctor; he is a scientist.
Cody?
Well, I agree with Rebecca. Might have, possibly, could explain. I mean, there is nothing concrete from this defensive strategy that could connect or explain the result of this case, which is why you call experts. I mean, the same thing Rebecca keeps saying is that, you know, I mean, this man's literally up here talking about a high glucose level. I mean, does a high glucose level cause you to lie about a green van? Does it cause you to lie about hitting her with a truck, lying about the route, lying about turning your phone? I mean, this cross-examination is going to be surgical. You are not even a doctor. You didn't even look. I call them desk jockeys and give an opinion. A lot of cases, this wouldn't even be allowed, but because it's a death penalty case, there's a lot more latitude because of the scrutiny in the appellate process. It's just the way it is.
Rebecca, what's been the reaction to the jury of the testimony we've heard this morning, and also to the laughing? A lot of people in our chat have been very upset about the laughter that they're hearing coming out of this courtroom.
Yeah, not my reaction. I mean, I think at one point I did run in there, and it was at the point when I think that she actually addresses the jury like, "Oh, stay awake" or something like that, and a couple of them smiled. But beyond that, They're just business-like, the jury is. I don't think that they appreciate all of the laughter and all that as well. And I looked over at Athena's family. I think we had a cutaway at one point, and they're just kind of stoically sitting there because I can't even imagine what they're thinking, that this witness is, laughing and joking with the judge and all of her behavior. And I'm sure sometimes that's the way people cope with being in a stressful situation. But in a court of law, when you have a victim's family who have suffered such a horrific loss, and we've all heard that, the people in that courtroom and the jurors have heard that 1 hour tape of this little girl dying, it's not a laughing matter. There's nothing funny about testifying in this trial.
Absolutely. Cody, I'm gonna keep asking you to jump in because I'm reacting to Rebecca, what she was saying.
Yeah, I mean, just said someone has to get a grip, tighten this up, whether it be leading, narrative. I mean, look, in my experience, if you've got the grenade, pull the pin and let's get it on. So what you're going to do is put this guy up there. If you've got 3 conclusions, state all 3, and then you're going to unpeel that onion to explain each of the 3 conclusions, and then you're going to come back to those conclusions at the end. Start strong, end strong, pass the witness. They don't have anything. That's why you've got this professor narrative there, like we're all back in college or high school, and you're losing the jury. And the jury, honestly, they're going to take it against the defense. At this point,
they're going to get mad.
Yes, just do what needs to be done. And if you can't, that's fine. But at this point, it's a turnoff. You're trying to restore any credibility that remains, or maintain that, I should say. And I'm just not seeing this needle being moved at all.
Right. In fact, if anything, I thought with the speech pathologist, when she's asked at the end by the prosecutor about what is her understanding of what happened, and she regurgitates Tanner Horner's original story, and then she's told, well, that's not what happened. And then she says, it makes me wonder what the whole thing was about. Why? And then he goes on and says, did his autism cause him to murder and kill? And she says, I'm sorry, that it didn't. I was like, well, drop the mic right there.
He'll ask it of every witness. That exact question, and every witness will say, no, thank you, let's move on.
Yeah. Remember, I talked about that yesterday, that having listened to all of the 8 expert witnesses that they took on voir dire before the jury, they asked that exact same question of everyone, even their top expert that's going to come up here and say that he has ADHD, he has all of the, he's on the autism spectrum, that he has the inability to feel empathy, which is actually also what this guy is saying. And again, remember, they're all reading each other's reports. They each sort of evaluated him, and then they shared the reports, and they're all coming to their conclusions based on each defense expert's expertise or their evaluation of their reports. And so they're all sort of coming up and saying the same thing over and over and over again. But again, the prosecution is going to ask that same question of every single one of these defense witnesses. But did it cause them to do this? And well, no, it doesn't. And that's even going to be what their star doctor witness. Brother who's in prison, they're going to talk to him. I still don't know if grandma's going to testify or Cassie's going to testify, but they are going to bring in and periodically between these witnesses, the expert witnesses, they're going to bring in some witnesses and people that knew him.
Sense of who else we might hear from today besides Mr. Brainscan?
I feel like he's probably going to be the majority of the afternoon, and then the judge may go ahead and call it a day. He's been letting the jury go a little early on Fridays, also because the defense lawyers and the prosecutors, the prosecutors live in Wise County, and so he's been letting them, get home early. But that just means that this trial is lasting a little bit longer.
For sure, Cody.
We'll wait and see. To be determined.
Yeah.
More.
TBD. Yeah, for sure. Anything else you want to add, Rebecca?
No, I'm going to sit in for you in the afternoon, but based on some of the other witnesses that I've seen and some of the testimony, they don't look too impressed. In fact, as I keep saying, this jury just looks tired. They're like exhausted.
Well, these people have seen and heard things that, people should never see and hear. And we've talked about this. You and I've talked about, these are lay people. They're not denizens of like this system. They're not, they don't routinely probably go attend trials and see this sort of thing. And even you, I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, and I know how affected you were by that audio and video. And so I can only imagine where they're at with it.
Well, and Tanya, I think that the defense risk alienating this jury by continuing to, it's almost a little insulting in a way to keep bringing up these experts that aren't saying anything really about why he would have done something like this over and over and over and over again after they've heard from Athena's mom and they've heard that tape and they know what they know. And you're scratching your head as to, okay, so why are you putting on this witness after witness after witness? It's not saying a whole lot. I don't know if that's going to alienate the jury, and it's almost insulting to them.
You think they've alienated the jury, Cody?
Well, I'm not sure. I mean, they have a strategy. They're going to, so far, keep doing that. I just think if you have a group of witnesses, today may be a good day to do a postmortem for the week and say, all right, do we need to cut some of these people? Who's the strongest that we have left based on the people that we have left? I have no idea why a brother or anyone else would come because they have to put on a defense. Obviously, that's not my point. Is that how long do you want to make this defense by saying kind of the same thing, or maybe do a little bit more prep on can we restructure how we're presenting this? Because the prosecutor is going to ask the same thing.
Right.
Could it have had some type of different effect? I mean, again, we're talking about a guy today again that has not even reviewed. He's just looking at these brain scans. At the high glucose level, and like Rebecca mentioned, he's 20% lower on his left orbital cortex. Well, that's consistent with people who have autism. That's not a contributing factor to an act of violence. That's just a result of having autism, which we know that, right? So,
right. And just because you have autism does not mean you're going to be a killer.
Again, yes, exactly.
So, all right,
But
Rebecca.
is it a mitigating? I'm sorry. Does it get you to mitigating? And would you execute an autistic person? I guess is what they're going to argue. Maybe.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, that has to be kind of their main theme. When you get to assuming a unanimous 12, check that first box for continuous threat. And then if you get to that second level of mitigation, that would be the only point that has that burden shifts at that point. Has a defense, and there's no burden of proof on the second prompt. They put forth enough mitigation to justify a non-death sentence, which would be LWOP, life without parole. And so that is surely what they're doing, trying to get the jury there. I just don't know the effectiveness of repeating this over and over through particular family members that we've already kind of got the gist of how he was raised.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's an effective strategy. Perhaps they will go back this weekend and come up with a different strategy. Who knows? But that is definitely their angle, Rebecca, because you've got to get it on that second prompt.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Rebecca, we're going to let you go grab a little bit of lunch and get a little break before this starts back up after lunch.
All right, thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, I don't know, Cody. It's like yesterday we had the guy who was with the drug treatment place, and he's like, he remembers Tanner Horner's mom, doesn't remember Tanner Horner at all, and he essentially had nothing to say. And I couldn't. He was the one that came in by Zoom, and I couldn't. I struggled with why in the world, except for killing time, because I covered a lot of trials, and sometimes you'll have witnesses when you're trying to get in crime scene stuff, and you have to lay the predicate to get there. Like I see that kind of stuff, where you're just like, oh God, I really wish we could skip over all this, that kind of stuff. But just to have a witness who's pointless, I can't even understand why this person's on the stand.
Yeah. Well, their strategy is that, and if they believe there are mitigation components here with these 4 or 5 items with, fetal alcoholism, with, I believe this latest witness called it some type of, stress-related issues from childhood. There's no diagnosis for that. It's just having a bad childhood.
Stress.
Yes.
My childhood wasn't perfect.
Yes, it was not. But again, there's a lot of young people who get bullied and they turn it into a positive. They go to boot camp. They serve their country in the military, go to the Marine Corps, go become law enforcement officers, go to the gym, go play sports, go camping with their dad. And they find ways to get out of it as opposed to leaning on a crutch their entire lives. For instance, Beth, an example of enabling and coddling of a 30-year-old man. I mean, saying in that courtroom, he should have never been in a vehicle alone. This man's 30 years old.
Yeah.
Even if you believe her statement is my point.
Right.
I mean, this man is 30 years old and people are still coddling, enabling that conduct.
Right.
And,
well, he shouldn't be allowed to drive by himself.
Well, sure. I mean, but that's my point.
He's a high-functioning autistic person. I mean, come on, give me a break.
If every young boy wants to use that, and perhaps that's where we are these days, but I have 1,000 more who have turned that around and done something positive with their life, and initiated that process and use that to their advantage, not to just sit there on a crutch and say, okay, this explains my behavior, which is what he wants to do. He has classic narcissism. He's a guy. This guy is a me guy. It's all about him.
Right.
You go back through his statement.
About his letters. You and I were talking offline about the letters and how it was all about me and my problems, my wants, my needs. I didn't like the route they gave me. And then he made up a whole different story in the letter to the
Right. Please take care of my family, another person that made me do this. Failed suicide attempt, right? He wants people to think that he doesn't have the brain capacity to go on and live. Well, he's done this before. Right. That's an intentional act of manipulation for someone with his psychological tendencies, I would say. And so he leaves those letters there, one to within his family, one to the detectives. And again, it's all on the other one they put in from the jail that he wrote, I forget where, but it's all about me.
Oh, yeah.
I can't believe I'm going to lose my job. These routes were difficult, and how I'd love to get back with my 1-year-old son for Christmas. Again, the man who has removed an entire family from seeing this beautiful 7-year-old for every Christmas they'll have for the rest of their lives, every Easter, her wedding, learning how to drive, graduating, every milestone. That little girl never even had her first milestone. I mean, that's the thing about this. When you're really looking at permanency and taking things away, taking away people's purpose in life from that family that he did when he decided to do what he did, and still refused to tell officers or anybody else why he did it. As a baseline, And that's why the ranger kept coming back to him, and even for a rapport building, and says, okay, his alter ego Zero, which we know was a lie, but saying, would you please tell me where she is? The same way why you did it, what it was. If you can, he hasn't done it. I mean, everyone needs to realize this. So even if you believe there's some remorse with this man,
Right.
which I don't, but if you do believe that, the first thing he would have said in that letter is, here's why I did this. And you will never forgive, but here's why I did it. He couldn't even do that. To this day, he can't do that. So that's the whole point of, if you go back and watch that interview, they always want to know, again, you don't ever need to prove motive in a criminal case.
Right.
But it's for the family.
Right. I mean, I don't know why he did it, and I don't know that we ever will. He may not even really know why he did it, but there's clearly some sexual deviancy at play here.
Yeah.
And it seems like he had, based on the evidence we've seen, there was some sort of ideating, like building up into this, Okay, here we go. I'm going to go through some questions folks are putting in the chat because people like it when we answer these.
Okay.
Somebody wants to know, do you and Cody think that the fact that the speech lady still thought Tanner's lie, they want to know what we think about that.
Yeah, well, we certainly had something to say when she said it, right?
I was like, wow.
I mean,
I was like, well, she hasn't been watching the trial, obviously, so she followed that rule.
Well, I mean, she still thought that, right, he had hit her with the vehicle, and of course the prosecutor did a very good job saying, well, if I tell you this fact does not exist anymore, that he in fact did not hit her with the truck, and she stuck to her story and said, well, I still believe he should have had a 30-year-old man should have had someone in that vehicle. But that comment alone is from an enabling standpoint. Is this poor little fella? Well, no, he's 30 years old. He's a grown man. He can't.
He's a
take
big
care.
boy.
He's a big boy. He should have had someone watching over him. But for that act, that never happens. Well, then you remove that assumption, which again is false. Let's assume she thought it was true, and then she still says the same thing. And that's why. What he followed up with, you're not saying it's the reason why. No, I'm not saying that at all. And then there's no more question.
Back. We need a good 20-minute break. We just need to just go catch our, because watching these trials it's a lot. So we're going to come back 10 till 1, 12:15.
Important thing, he's going to discuss the future danger element.
Right.
In which that always involves a prison population, because obviously if you don't receive an execution date, you receive a life without parole sentence in TDCJ, meaning the community around you will be other inmates. And so this always revolves around this type of testimony. And it's expected to state that he's concerned about control. You do not discuss this erratic behavior.
Mm-hmm. Believe me,
look,
I somebody who sometimes struggles with anger management.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, look, in general terms, it's nice to have a cooling mechanism. I'm envious of people who have a much cooler one than me. But in this instance, you
Sure.
understand my drift is the erratic outbursts. You know, that's and a catalyst, violent, reacting on that. And that's the point. When I'm going through the progression of stages where he could say no, you can shut down the brain telling you things. He's choosing the alternative, the evil, because he wants to do these things. There's no zero. We know that. He made that up as a manipulation tactic to try to get his rear end out of the jam that he's in. But this guy, I expect this rebuttal witness, again, Dr. Rambula, to be very good because he will be more succinct, more efficient, and I think he will be surgical because that's
Right.
all this jury needs to hear. Let's get
Would
it
you
on.
even do rebuttal?
Yes,
You
with
would.
this guy I would. I think
Okay.
you need to talk about the future danger.
Okay.
You know, we always talk about kind of holding something back. They did arrest, obviously, without putting that on. We're in a slow plea now. It doesn't really matter. But yes,
You would. Okay.
yes. I mean, without
It does make
the
sense.
jury, we could. The jury's not going to. hold it against him just for doing that, because what he's doing is this rebuttal witnesses. He's taking everything the defense has said and he's just going to turn it
Flip it
upside
around.
down.
Right. And I know you answered this question earlier, but somebody put it back in the chat, so I'll ask it again for the folks that weren't here earlier when Cody answered this question. You're called and you were asked to represent Tanner Horner.
I would take a pass. I would sit this one out. But I work for myself, so you know.
Then you have that, right.
Well, I do. I mean, a lot of lawyers. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, he has the right to have
Counsel.
and look, people know, anyone who knows me. Okay, I'm not. That's my right. Like, I don't do child cases. I mean, I don't. You could ask anyone. I'm not judging anyone who does.
Right.
A person has a right to have someone defend them 100%. That's a fact. I mean, why would I do that to someone?
Right.
It's not fair for them.
Right.
And I can do that.
And the reality is the lawyers here, folks, are part of a special unit that works for the state that represents defendants in cases of capital murder cases. So they don't necessarily been chit-chatting for a while, but it's all good. So do you, somebody, I don't, this is a little bit off topic. Somebody was asking if for some reason this jury came back and they weren't unanimous on the death penalty, would you think Texas would consider changing it like they did? I think somebody said they did that in Florida.
I think they would. With the people in the legislature right now, I certainly think that they would.
Okay. Well, Zeke says, okay, I think we're back. Mike's off. Listen.
I wanted to be ready. Yes, I appreciate that very much. This afternoon on Friday. I've got a few questions for you here. How many times have you testified on behalf of capital murder defendants in Texas?
In Texas specifically, I want to say 7 or 8 times.
Okay. And how many total?
Probably about 15 total.
And in fact, if I remember correctly, you were in Eastland in January doing the same thing.
Yes, sir.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Testifying as to the brain abnormalities as of that time, correct?
That is correct, sir.
And I noticed, and this, I think you call it your professor. Is that what you call it?
Professor Bode, yes.
All right. How many times do you think you've given that spiel of being the professor?
I think I've only done it like that 2 or 3 times. I typically do a PowerPoint though.
Okay. We had both today. You had you and Power.
Yes.
Now, in this particular case, who hired you in this case?
I was hired by the defense attorney group.
Okay. And who's that?
So Susan Anderson in particular.
And how many times do you think you've worked with them in the past? Over.
I think 4 times. I'm not absolutely certain on the number.
4 times, including the one in Eastland, or just 4 times including today?
4 times including today. So I don't believe that Ms. Anderson was involved in the Eastland case.
Her organization was involved.
Jackson, your approach.
Sure, disregard the last question asked by the prosecutor, okay?
You have scans ordered to be done on Mr. Nye?
Yes.
Okay, and those were ordered by,
So I believe that they were ordered by Dr. Yount. I also had an order from a Dr. Rouse.
okay.
Rouse, R-O-U-S-E.
And in this particular case, just so we get this out of the way, what's your bill in this case?
So my total bill for everything has been about $40,000. That includes the costs for the actual scans.
Okay. And like I think we talked about in this case, you're not a doctor, psychologist, neuropsychologist. You're very clear about that, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you can't make any type of medical diagnosis or conduct any type of psychological tests.
That is correct.
And in fact, you can't treat or diagnose patients as part of your profession.
That is correct.
So really, in this particular case, you can only really tell us about what you found, but you cannot connect with what you found to any particular diagnosis.
Again, I can talk about it in the general sense of diagnoses. You can't make the diagnosis from the imaging findings alone.
And by looking at something that you see, I'm going to make sure I'm clarifying this here. You can't say that any particular defendant, including the defendant in this case, has any particular diagnosis just by looking at it.
That's correct. So I can't say that he has abnormal brain structure and function, but I cannot do a diagnosis.
All right. Now, the 3 reports that you did in this case, you said EE, I'm doing the same order, MRI, and PET scan, right?
That is correct.
And with regard to the EEG and the PET scan, the MRI and the PET scan, both the doctors who read those indicated that the defendant's brain in this case was functioning within normal limits.
So the clinical interpretation of those scans is that there are no abnormalities there are no gross abnormalities on the MRI. There are no gross metabolic abnormalities on the PET scan. That is correct.
And in fact, if now you don't have any report from the PET scan, right?
I do not. It is possible that the facility did one, but I do not have that.
You got a report from the one on the MRI, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this was done by Dr. How do you say his last name?
Dwayne Buono.
Buono, B-U-O-N-O?
Yes, sir.
And he's in Florida, right?
Yes, sir.
I think you said he's a board certified radiologist?
I believe he's a board certified neuroradiologist.
Neuroradiologist.
I think so. I know he's board certified radiologist. I know he did a fellowship in neuroradiology. I'm not sure about the details of the certification there.
All right. And as a result of that, he says things in his report, just going to make sure I get this right, that things are unremarkable, normal, so on and so forth. Is that right?
Yes, and that's very, very common in psychiatric conditions.
That's what our medical doctor says.
Yes.
Okay. And in fact, I think that with regard to the MRI and the PET scan, you indicated that most of the things on there were normal and intact. Is that what you said?
And yes, most of the areas we look at are normal and intact. There were several that were abnormal, particularly on the PET.
And I think that we saw, and I'm not going to try to get into the beta, gamma, theta wave thing with you.
So those are the definitions of the beta and the delta.
Okay.
Yes.
But I think you also said that at some point that with regard to the test, you get false positives on that test at some point, correct?
So on any test, you can get false positives. There's a statistical technique known as a Benjamin-Huckelberg correction for multiple comparisons that I also applied to the data. That isolates the ones that are more likely to be true positive versus false positive findings.
And you indicated that the defendant, I think I'm not trying to butcher your terminology here, but he had low FA values and that affected short-term memory.
So he has low FA values in the fornix.
Okay.
The fornix typically supports short-term memory. I can't look at the imaging and say there's fornix abnormalities, therefore he must have memory deficits. Again, these are neurobiological correlates of these things. It would be up to somebody doing cognitive testing to say that he actually has those deficits.
Right. And so with regard to that, that's not going to prevent him from having long-term memory that would keep him from understanding that it's wrong not to kill someone.
Long-term would not have him forget that.
Now, when I'm looking at all these abnormalities that you're talking about, and you described a whole lot of stuff, okay, and I'm not going to try to talk about all the technology behind it, but how is it with all of this stuff that the defendant is not just sitting in a room drooling somewhere?
Yeah. So there are levels of abnormalities. These techniques are very, very sensitive. This profile of abnormalities is still on the relatively mild side. So these are the types of abnormalities with function with things like autism spectrum disorders. The fact that he has a lot of them, doesn't mean he's a fully demented individual.
Okay. And I guess what I'm asking is that in this case, I guess what I'm asking, how is it possible that he can function, for example, drive a car, read a map, things of that nature, if he has all of these abnormalities and things that you're talking about?
So again, it matters where the abnormalities are. His abnormalities are predominantly in the social cognition system. So he has orbital compromise. He doesn't have compromise in personal support type skills.
So, but with regard to what you're talking about today, you haven't watched the videos in this case, have you?
No, sir.
You didn't watch any of the evidence as far as what happened in this case?
No, sir.
So you can't comment as about whether or not he has any specific real world deficits. You can't make those comments.
I can't from the imaging. I can say that people in general with these profiles have deficits in social cognition. I cannot specifically say that other the records of the spectrum disorder, the core feature of that.
You'll agree with me that the human brain has an amazing ability to adapt and function despite many factors that come into play.
It can, yes.
And when we talk about, you gave an example, I think, of all the things you compare your test brain to. What was that called? The sample of all the people?
The neurotypical database.
Neurotypical data. And there's not really anything such as a normal brain. Nobody has the same brain, do they?
Not exactly the same. So the neurotypical database takes into account the normal variability.
And it's possible that everyone has potentially some form of abnormality going on, but that doesn't mean they have any deficits.
So again, what you would see is, depending on how many things you measure, you would see that an individual subject might have one or two abnormalities. And this is this multiple comparison problem. We use the Benjamin-Hochberg to address that issue. So the number of abnormalities that Mr. Horner has, we would see in less than 0.01% of the population.
So even with any abnormality and even with some deficits, you're not telling us that a person is going to act a certain way?
Again, I can only talk about the general, this is what it's correlated with. From the imaging alone, I cannot say anything specific about Mr. Horner's behavioral pattern.
I'm talking about anyone. You can't say any person will act a certain way.
Not explicitly, that is
You
correct.
can't say whether or not they'll commit crimes.
Correct.
And you can't say whether or not they'll engage in any particular conduct.
Correct.
And example, I mean, we have individuals out there, let's say, my example I thought was football players. You agree with me that they may have some brain injury at some point. Would you agree with that?
Many of them, yes.
But that doesn't automatically mean that they have deficits.
It doesn't explicitly and automatically mean that. It means that they are much more likely to. But for an individual person, I can't say, hey, I got this finding, therefore this person must have this deficit. You can't do that from the imaging.
Right. And you said you got a grant from our special operations warfighters, correct?
Correct.
And in that particular field, we've got a lot of military service members and veterans that may have some abnormality due to a combat injury. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be somehow unable to continue defending our country.
Again, not necessarily, but on average, they have compromised skills that compromise operational readiness, which is why SOCOM is funding us to look for therapeutics.
Now, let's break this down a little bit. We've been talking about the brain. Will you agree with me that the brain and a person's mind are different?
There's lots of theoretical work on that. That's a philosophical debate. I will say that the way that one's mind interacts with the world is through the brain. And so if your brain is damaged, how your mind is going to interact with the world is highly likely to be compromised.
But your mind, you'll agree with me, is where we get the person's reasoning, motive, things of that nature. Right?
But it's all filtered through the brain. So I see that dress as yellow and white. I cannot free will myself to think that that dress is black and blue. And so the way that your mind, if you want to call it that, perceives the world, interacts with the world, is through the brain. So if your brain is damaged, the information going into your mind, the information coming out of your mind is going to be compromised.
And so when you're talking about that, use the term free will. Your testing is not going to be able to determine free will in an individual.
No, absolutely not.
And then neuroscience really doesn't have anything to do with person's free will, does it?
Again, there's lots of neuroscience written about free will and mental status.
But your neuroscience, you're not able to distinguish between those who cannot control their impulses and the people who choose not to control their impulses.
I cannot clearly distinguish between that. That is correct.
How many brains do you think you've scanned?
Across conditions, I've probably been involved in the evaluation of about 7,000 brains.
And the stuff you're looking at, what we're talking about today, Mr. Horner's brain, right? This is not the first time you've seen stuff like that before.
It's not. This is one of the rare occasions where there are so many nodes specifically within the social cognition network. But I've seen other abnormalities, again, more commonly related to things like TBI as opposed to autism spectrum disorder.
And you were in here and you heard the last witness in here, did you not? The nice speech therapy lady?
Yes, sir.
And you heard from her that she said that autism did not cause this crime. You can't disagree with that.
I do not disagree with that.
That's nice. Redirect.
Judge, I will end at the verdict.
May Dr. Wine be excused finally? Thank you, sir. Our next witness will be testifying remotely, so I need a few minutes to set up everything, okay? Okay, everybody, give me a few minutes. I need to fix HDMI cable.
It's up there,
Okay. Okay.
Okay, Cody. apparently if you got a damaged brain, that can affect your mind. I mean, right?
Right.
But he doesn't know anything about Tanner Horner.
No.
And can't make a diagnosis because he's not a doctor.
Right. He presented the same conclusions as the others. So those last 3 questions, again, surgical from the prosecutor. I can't say anything specific about Mr. Horner specifically or anyone else specifically. They would act a certain way simply from reviewing the imaging. He acknowledged that from the prosecutor. The prosecutor also asked him, can you distinguish between people who cannot control their impulses and people who choose not to control their impulses, like I was talking about earlier with the cooling mechanism?
Right.
He said no. So then the prosecutor ends with, you agree with all the other witnesses the defense has put on that autism did not cause this crime. And he said, I cannot disagree with that. So again, that's where we are.
It's like a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah, but again,
It's a whole lot of something in the way that it's like,
Yeah.
Does that seems like it tends to help the prosecution more than the defense?
It helps the prosecution, but the defense has, like I said, you just have to go with what you got. They're going with what they have. They're appointed on this case.
They're doing the best
I
they
mean,
can.
sure. I mean, there's not, he has the right to a defense, and sometimes there's just not much to defend.
Right. You could be the best lawyer in the world,
Sure.
and if that's all you got, that's all you
Sure.
got.
I mean, that's their strategy, and that's the way they're presenting it. And there's always the possibility, I don't believe a probability, but there's a possibility that there could be a juror on there that's feeling something that others may think they shouldn't be in light of that audio and video. I keep, the vector here for me is you have that audio and video. Usually something that strong is going to be a scar on someone's brain for as long as they have recall. So.
Oh, and Doug, the guy made $40K for this.
And he made $40,000.
That's a lot of money. Okay, so we've got Rebecca Lopez, who's going to give us an update.
Yeah, I mean, Tanya, it's exactly what I suspected, that they were going to challenge him on the fact that he wasn't really a doctor and that he can't diagnose people. And I thought it was interesting that the prosecution did bring up, well, there's football players that might have traumatic brain, which is exactly what I was talking about, CTE, before we went to break, and they're not committing violent crimes because of that. And so, or kidnapping 7-year-old girls. So I thought that was interesting that the prosecution brought that up. We are going to have one more expert witness testifying via Zoom. And so we probably will not have any more civilian witnesses until next week sometime, where we do suspect that they're going to bring
I think I'm most interested in hearing from the grandma. Well, and also Cassie, but it doesn't sound like we're going to hear from Cassie.
I feel like we're not going to hear from Cassie. I don't know that for a fact, but I don't believe that she is one of the witnesses that the defense is planning to call. I would suspect that they might call the grandmother because, she's the one that raised him. And usually if you're the defense, you bring up some of your stronger, more emotional witnesses that could give some sort of more of a sympathetic look at the defendant through their eyes, through someone that was close to him, and that would be his grandma.
Cody, do you think that in rebuttal, could the prosecution call Cassie? I mean,
Yes.
It could. Could you see that happen?
I'm not sure, but they can call once they're in rebuttal. They can, it's wide open.
Interesting. That would be.
I do think that the prosecution only has 2 rebuttal witnesses that they're planning on calling, and one is we heard from during the voir dire part of this, and that was the first person that we heard from. I think it was last Friday, and it is an expert and possibly a second expert. I don't see them calling Cassie either, but I just don't think we're going to see Cassie in this trial.
And I guess what we want to hear, it's not like that's
right.
I mean, I'm interested in hearing from her because I'm interested in knowing more about what he was doing in the days coming up to this and after, because it's a couple of days before he gets arrested.
Yeah.
Well, and she's the one that comes up with the whole idea of zero because she claims to have multiple personalities. So, but I think strategically, and the risk of either the defense or prosecution calling her, I don't know if the risk outweighs the value.
Right.
Of her.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, you wouldn't need to, but the question was, could they? And the answer is certainly. They can ask for it. And, like Rebecca, I don't have the rebuttal list in front of me. You said there's only 2. They could request that the court give them some leeway and add an additional witness if, but also it's rebuttal. So it's kind of wide open at that point. I think it would be, I agree with you. What Rebecca just said, if she was the architect of this Agent Zero personality, but, I think a lot of the witnesses already said he doesn't suffer from multi-personality disorder. So anything that could agree with you, what you said about this, Rebecca, could just throw one little wrench in the way it's going. Why would you take that risk? Essentially, if you already have that in through someone else,
right?
Obviously, if it wasn't a death penalty case, maybe take a different strategy. But use those 2, and then just for the sake of the jury, close this out.
Exactly, Rebecca. What's been the reaction of the jury? You said, I know you were sitting in the courtroom during the last part of this testimony.
I mean, like I said, this jury just sort of looks tired. I think the judge this is the last witness for the day and probably going to let the jury go home early. But, they are taking notes diligently throughout this whole trial. So they're paying attention to every one of the witnesses, even though at times the testimony can be a little cumbersome. And maybe because I've heard most of these witnesses twice now, the expert witnesses, but this is the first time the jury's hearing from them. But they are taking notes, and they do seem very interested. And I do believe that we're not going to, they're going to try to finish up this case a little bit sooner. I think that we'll be done with most of the defense experts by Thursday. We do know that this is going to close the arguments probably on Tuesday.
Okay, interesting. What do
I can see that.
Anything you want to add?
No.
Okay. Well, Rebecca, we're going to let you go back and get seated back in the courtroom, and we will look forward to chatting with you when we wrap up for the day. Well, while we wait for this Zoom to get started, I'm rolling back in my mind some of the stuff from the first 2 weeks. Okay, wait a minute. Zeke put it up. I can see that they just zoned in on that door, which is usually indicative of now they go back up to the ceiling. Now they're back on the door. See, they don't do this for me because they were setting up for a Zoom, so they should be bringing Tanner Horner back out here any minute. So apparently we're going to get another expert via Zoom. We don't know what kind of expert. The defense, unlike the prosecution, doesn't have to be they don't have to clue us in ahead of time, right?
Right.
So that's why we're usually in the prosecution's case we could be a little bit more definitive, but we just don't really know who this is going to be. But it sounds like we're going to end early, which I can't imagine. I would have been shocked if we'd gone until 5.
Yeah.
I mean, this
Friday, it's a lot of information, and it's not just some mundane, tax evasion case. It takes a lot out of these jurors. It's difficult. It's emotional. But Judge Geiger, he's run an efficient court. I know they break every day, a little bit early, but things have gone efficiently.
Somebody's asking, do they have impact statements in cases like this?
Yes.
They'll do that, but that'll be after we have a verdict. So after the jurors have been released. So we have sound back in the courtroom. Let's take a listen.
Y'all ready? Okay, let's go. See yourself on here. See yourself on. Oh, okay. Oh, I got you. Well, as you approach the magistrate. I might pick you up. We good? All right, everyone make a seat. I'm sorry. Ladies and gentlemen, this witness has been previously sworn to testify truthfully. Mr. Go.
Thank you. Dr. Bigler, could you state your name for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Aaron, E-R-I-N, David Bigler, B as in boy, I-G-L-E-R.
And you don't have to go into detail. The court giving you permission to testify remotely for some health issues, right?
That is correct.
What are your major areas of training and expertise?
Well, I'm Professor Emeritus of Psychology and Neuroscience at Brigham Young University, and I was formerly Professor of Psychology and Neuroscience at the University of Texas at Austin. Also held an appointment at the University of Texas Health Science Center in San Antonio when I was in Texas. I'm a clinical neuropsychologist, licensed, board certified in that specialty, and I'm a cognitive neuroscientist and researcher as well as a clinician.
And does that include expertise in neuropsychology and neurophysiology and neurophysiological diagnostics and neuroimaging?
Yes, those are all of my specialty areas. I was a postdoctoral fellow at the Barrow Neurological Institute in Phoenix, Arizona before taking my position at the University of Texas and the State Hospital there in Austin. And then I was recruited back to Brigham Young University to help develop their neuroscience program and all of those specialty areas that you just mentioned.
And have you been published in those fields?
Yes, I've been a professor all those years and I established and directed the Brain Imaging and Behavior Laboratory. I also developed a magnetic resonance imaging research center at Brigham Young University and directed that until my retirement in 2018. As a professor and director of large laboratories involved in research, I've published extensively in the peer-reviewed literature on the interface of brain imaging and behavior, which was the name of my laboratory.
Did you also publish textbooks or book chapters?
Yes, I published 12 different textbooks, working on the 6th edition of one of the textbooks that I've co-authored, and 80 some odd book chapters and over 400 peer-reviewed articles in the field.
Have you received any awards or scholarships?
Yes, I've received a number of awards, both nationally and internationally, and I've lectured nationally and internationally, and lectured at most of the major universities here in the United States.
And have you received any grants or fellowships?
Yes. As I mentioned, I fellowship trained in neurophysiology and neuropsychology. That was a long time ago, 1974 to 77. And I've been a co-investigator on numerous grants over the years that they're detailed in my vita.
And did you examine Tanner Horn?
I did not.
So were you asked to give any specific opinions or diagnoses of Tanner?
I was not.
Were you asked to testify regarding brain anatomy and brain functioning in neuropsychiatric disorders generally?
Yes, that was what I was asked to do, to assist his counsel in understanding brain anatomy and brain function and contemporary methods for evaluating structure and functions of the human brain.
Okay, and did you review some materials in preparation for testifying?
I did.
And did you observe Dr. Lewine's testimony earlier today?
I did.
So it was kind of a mouthful for what we asked you to do. We brought up to the jury in our opening about how important the brain is. Did we ask you really to educate on how the brain and behavior interrelate?
Yes. In fact, the motto of my research lab was every behavior has an anatomy. The behavior emerges first in the brain and then outwardly in behavior.
Now, I have a model brain here, so you can direct me if you want to use that to explain anything. But can you please start by describing brain anatomy and brain function?
Yeah, so I believe that the model that you have is, I have an older version of the model, and I'm holding that up here. We saw some diagrams in Dr. Lewine's presentation. This is a model. So it typically starts with the 4 lobes. So this is the frontal lobe, this is the parietal lobe, this is the occipital lobe, and I'm holding the brain here by the temporal lobe, and down here is the cerebellum, and this is the brainstem. And then if we turn it, this is called medial. If we turn it medially here, now we're looking at the inner part of the left hemisphere. And there's a couple of important areas here that we're talking. This area here is that upper area that Dr. Lewine was talking about. And then this area right here that looks like a curve here, or a bridge. In fact, that's actually the Latin part of it. It's the fornix. This is the fornix. And the back of the fornix comes out of the temporal lobe, and then it dives into a structure here called the thalamus. And then there's projection that comes up into the cortex, but in particular to this area right here, which is called the cingulus gyrus here. So that's a brief overview of some of the main areas of the brain, and I'm happy to discuss their function in more detail if need be.
Yeah, can you talk briefly? I think Dr. Lewine mentioned it didn't go into much detail about how different parts of the brain, he gave a few examples, different parts of the brain control different functions. And he mentioned sort of networks. Can you talk some about what neural networks are?
Yes, neural networks are very important because the brain functions always as a unit. Dr. Lewine mentioned that the brain processes 100 trillion signals every moment of our existence. It's incredibly complex. There's nothing more complex than the human brain. And so you have these major hubs in the brain, and then you have these nodes that connect to the hubs. Dr. Lewine used those particular terms. Telephone poles or power lines. Now, of course, we have telephones, so it's a little bit of an older analogy. But the connector of the telephone analogy, that is that axon, diagram of that axon. In the classroom, I illustrate it like this. I hold my arm up. This is the cell body. This is where of the neuron. This is where all the metabolic machinery is taking place. These are the dendrites. They're communicating with other axons. This is where the synapse occurs. And then there's one singular process that comes out of the cell body. It can branch into multiple areas, but then it terminates in the synaptic area to communicate with the next. And so you have major hubs and you have minor hubs, and they form these networks because they connect to all of these different nodes. So there's not just one area dedicated in the brain that carries out function. It's multiple areas working contiguously and simultaneously to generate first perceptions and initial processing, and then to actually generate behavior. I always like to use the analogy of roads up to Dallas often. I did things with the different universities up there. And, I-35 is a nice direct route until you get just outside of Dallas. And then all these other highways, freeways, and interstates start to connect. So that's a hub. But you can go anywhere in the United States now once you get those hubs. The brain is exactly the same way. Everything is interconnected.
So can you describe, I guess, kind of how that, I understand the analogy, but how does that end up controlling behavior through the way that those networks connect?
Well, each one of those hubs, each one of those particular networks is observing a different aspect of behavior. And so one of the areas that Dr. Lewine spoke of is this orbital frontal area. The reason it's called the orbital frontal area is it sits just above the orbit, the eye socket. And so this was referred to as the orbital frontal area because this is the frontal part of the brain. Well, this orbital frontal area has a connection with the temporal lobe. And the temporal lobe has these brain structures called the limbic system. And they're regulators of emotion, including emotional tone. This area up here is called the dorsal lateral, and then as you move forward, prefrontal cortex. This is the slower, more contemplating part of the brain. This is the reactive part of the brain. If there's a balance between contemplating, and this is one of the things that they're talking about in terms of social cognition, because social cognition gets tied in to emotional processing, emotional regulation, and emotional tone.
Now, I can throw in a little question that they had earlier.
Yes, well, again, some of the things from, let me start back with the brain develops as an experience-dependent organ. So it interacts with the environment, and the environment changes the brain environment and forth process that takes place. This upper part of the frontal cortex, which is slower to contemplate, and the temporal area and the orbital area are emotionally reactive. So one of the old adages of counting to 10, for example, before you say anything, is the flow of their control and dampen down emotions. But if emotions arise, then they cut off that contemplative part of the frontal cortex, and inappropriate behaviors come from that.
So when you have the disciplines of psychology, psychiatry, medicine trying to deal with psychiatric disorders or developmental disorders, is that where they're actually affecting the brain, correct?
Yes, that's where, all behavioral function. And from the standpoint of psychiatric disorders, it's really brain health. The psychiatric disorders are not some ethereal thing that's happening independent of the brain. They are, in fact, related to the brain.
And I believe Dr. Lewine referred to the philosophical idea of the mind, but we're talking about the physical brain and how it directly affects how we behave.
That's correct, because the brain is involved in perception. You have the perception, and then Dr. Lewine used the example of language processing, that in the right-handed individual typically starts here in the temporal area, but for it to actually be expressed as language, that has to communicate up here using techniques. One in the laboratory can actually watch that process happen, and then the behavior emerges. But it's the brain that's doing that behavior.
Is imaging one of the ways that you detect these, you determine the neural networks? Is that what the research has shown?
Yes, that's a major part of contemporary research looking at cognition and behavior.
And what kind of imaging are we talking about?
All the imaging that was discussed today, electroencephalography, magnetic resonance imaging, positron emission tomography.
So those are commonly used in scientific and forensic settings and clinical settings.
That's all correct.
So can you please explain how quantitative abnormalities would affect the neural networks?
So where one has to start, if you go back to the actual imaging, so Dr. Lewine spoke of the T1 weighted MRI. Well, that MRI is showing you the basic anatomy. In fact, the anatomy is so good on a T1 weighted MRI that it approximates what you would do in postmortem. So you could have a postmortem view and a side-by-side MRI, and you would see that they're very, very similar. But the resolution on MRI just takes you down to a millimeter. Well, in a single cubic millimeter of cortical brain tissue, you have somewhere around 100,000 neurons, and you have somewhere around 5 million synapses just in that little one millimeter area. And so when you're looking at the clinical scan, which was discussed this morning, you're looking at the gross anatomy, but you're not looking at the cellular level. You're having to make some inferences about that. And where the quantitative imaging assists is it's like artificial intelligence in a way. It's taking a deeper dive into the data. And as Dr. Lewine explained, that T1 weighted image gives you 3 tissue types: gray matter, that's where the cell bodies and the synapses occur; white matter, that's that singular process axon that then connects with other cells; and cerebral spinal fluid, CSF. The computer programs allow you to then what's called segment into white matter, gray matter, and cerebral spinal fluid. And then through a variety of very eloquent algorithms, it allows you to then classify those areas. You saw the images that had the colors. Those are classified images that are identifying specific areas of the brain. And now, because this was what's called a volume acquisition MRI, you know the parameters, and you can define these areas. We call them regions of interest. You can define those areas, and then you can quantify their volume. You can actually do even more. You can measure their shape, their contour, the surface area. So there's a number of metrics. The only ones that were applied here were volumetric analyses. But it's giving you a window into the MRI. And the PET imaging is telling you something more about metabolic function, and the EEG is telling you something more about the physiologic brain. This is called multimodality imaging, where you take this imaging and you integrate it to best understand what the imaging data is telling you about that individual.
Okay, and just to clarify real quick, when you're talking about the MRI was equivalent to a postmortem, basically saying if you took a brain out and looked at it and looked at the MRI, those are going to be matched up, right?
That's correct.
And you're talking about the PET scan being metabolic. Can you tell me what that means?
Well, as Dr. Wine testified, there's a radio tracer that is labeled to glucose. The neuron, and like Dr. Wine indicated, there's close to 100 billion neurons. And there's another set of cells called glial cells that are just as frequent, sometimes more. So you have in excess of 200 billion cells. They have no capacity to store oxygen or glucose. They always have to have oxygen and glucose. And so if you have a radio tracer that labels the glucose, then you can monitor the take. And then as Dr. Lewine was showing, you're from a quantitative analysis standpoint, you're looking at either increased or decreased activity from whatever the basic baseline would be in comparison to that neurotypical normative sample.
That basic level, you're
Metabolized.
Can you explain to the jury how neural network pathology relates to psychiatric disorders?
Well, one of the very interesting aspects of psychiatric disorders is it almost doesn't matter which psychiatric disorder one is looking at. Some of the key areas of the brain that are typically going to be involved, and that's true of all of the psychiatric disorders that have been discussed concerning Mr. Horner. It involves that inferior frontal area, the temporal lobe, and structures inside the temporal lobe called the hippocampus and the amygdala. The fornix takes that information from the hippocampus and some from the amygdala and transfers it to other parts of the brain. These are parts that are referred to as the limbic system. And so again, whether we're looking at depression, anxiety disorder, schizophrenia, whatever psychiatric condition we're looking at, the more common aberrations that are shown with these kinds of quantitative and multimodality techniques is that these areas of the brain are affected in some way, at some level.
Now, you mentioned before that Dr. Lewine's combination of those three tests is kind of a model for how you look at neural networks. Is that typical in the forensic and scientific community?
That's right.
And I believe, let me ask you another question. As far as things that can affect the brain, affect the neural networks, does that include things like toxic exposure, examples of fetal alcohol, lead, or toxic stress?
That's right.
Things like neurodevelopmental disorders like autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, are those things that you can also show a neurological link?
Correct.
We haven't talked much about psychiatric disorders, but are things like, I guess, one may refer to mood disorders, things like that. Those are also things that actually are grounded in your brain.
Yes, I mean, within those systems that I was talking about, there's a valence, a balance. And if there's underlying neurologic dysfunction, that balance can go off keel. And one can be overly emotional or emotionally reactive, or display deficits in judgment or conforming behavior to societal standards. All of those things can happen.
One more thing to talk about, I didn't remember the term, I think it was multimodality. Can you just break that down for me real quick?
Well, yes. So MRI is considered to be structural when you're using that T1 and some of the other imaging sequences. But one of the other things that Dr. Lewine did is the diffusion tensor imaging, which allows you to look at pathways. And you can actually apply what are called diffusion metrics to assess the integrity of those pathways. So that's telling you structure. The PET scan is telling you about metabolic activity. And the EEG is telling you about the physiology of the brain, how the brain is reacting and connecting. And one of the things he talked about, Dr. Lewine talked about, is coherence. So areas that are showing connectivity will have somewhat similar. I want you to look at how the net is connecting. And then as you go across these different modalities of imaging, you can make more inferences about how the brain is functioning and how that structural aspect of the brain relates.
Now, can you tell the jury a little bit about the difference between the clinical use of those imaging to detect gross abnormalities versus the clinical looking at more quantitative, those other issues, and forensic and scientific use of those different imaging?
Well, one of the things that's happening is a movement towards what's called precision medicine. And that's taking advantage of artificial intelligence, the power of these methods for rapidly examining the brain. And this is likely to become standard fare within, in my opinion, in the next 5 to 10 years. So that it's one thing to look at a brain, and the first line of assessment of a brain is to see, is there a medical necessity there? Is there a tumor? Is there a vascular lesion? Is there something that needs attention, an infection? Once that is confirmed not to be there, then you're looking at, is there any kind of major developmental abnormality, any other kind of deviation? And when those things are not present, there's a tremendous amount of information that is in that scan, but it's not looked at. But it can be now with the technology that we have. And it's moving in that direction. So for example, Dr. Lewine mentioned Alzheimer's disease. This is one of the areas where it's really happening quite quick. So as a neuropsychologist, I can administer tests that can measure memory, but I'm not necessarily looking specifically at the memory network. But with imaging, using especially diffusion tensor imaging, structural quantitative imaging, I can look at the different components of that. And so if I'm working up an Alzheimer's patient, then I want to know that I don't want to know just that the brain kind of looks normal. I want to know what's the size of the hippocampus, what's the connection of the hippocampus with the rest of the brain, and all of those things. So that's happening right now. It will move into the clinical world, in my opinion, in the next 5 to 10 years. Right now, it's primarily a research tool.
So that's when we're talking about the computer analysis. Is that becoming more available? Is that what you're saying?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I mean, the supercomputers are, so one of the, when I lecture on this, one of the slides I have is that every quantitative aspect of imaging analysis had to be done by hand, tracing the structures. When I started this when I was at the University of Texas, do all of these major quantitative analyses in a matter of a few minutes. It would take days to do that on an individual patient or client in the past, and now it can be done in a few minutes. And with supercomputers, it can be even done faster.
So the analysis itself is not new. That's something that's backed by research and studies.
Yes, we first published on quantitative image analysis back in the 1980s.
I'll pass witness.
Thank you, Judge. Hi, Dr. Bigler, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you just fine.
Okay, good. You did not do an evaluation on Tanner Horner, the defendant in this case, correct?
No, I did not see him, evaluate him, or anything else.
Have you ever met Tanner Horner?
No.
So you're here today just to testify, I guess, in general or educational reasons?
Correct.
And you're not testifying that Tanner Horner didn't know right from wrong, are you?
I am not.
Doctor? Did you hear the question?
Oh, right from wrong?
No, I'm sorry. The question was, you're not saying that autism was the cause of the crime in this case.
No.
And we asked this.
What, $1,000 or so?
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Dr. B, excuse me?
Yes, sir.
Doctor, thank you very much.
You're welcome, thank you.
Goodbye.
Okay, we're done for the day.
Okay, Cody, I think we both struggled to follow that and struggled to follow the point of it. He never met Tanner Horner, never examined him, and he was apparently testifying for general educational reasons.
Educational purposes, yeah. So we're all more educated in terms of a guy that read about some things. So we can all.
You feel more educated?
Not really. I don't at this point at 2:30 on a Friday. But I think that's what he believes, and that's fine. But yeah, I don't know. Like I said, TBD, I guess. They're just going to keep putting more and more of these type of witnesses there in support of that second special issue of mitigation. See if that carries the weight for them, and that's it.
Because I don't think we've had an expert witness yet who has actually examined Tanner Horner.
No,
we haven't. We are 3 days of the defense. 3 days.
you're right.
And not one expert who's actually examined him?
Yeah. So as we stand today, let's assume the jury has it. First special issue, say they're unanimous. Tanner Horner is a future danger. Now we go to the second special issue. Has the defense presented evidence enough to support a non-death sentence, a sentence of life without parole in your individual minds, and that would be their determination right now. The state is focusing on specifically that question. You're not saying that the autism caused that. Well, they're saying no. Obviously, you can't. They never even examined this person. They're just reading reports.
Well, some of them are not even doctors. They're not even qualified to make that.
They're general our horn about anyone. You're just giving a generic profile of what you read about. Yes. So that's what the defense has, and that's what they're going to keep using, presumably, going forward.
Wow. I guess I thought, I don't know what I thought, but I guess I thought we would see something more. I mean, and maybe they're just, you can't have more if there's not more.
There's not more. Right.
And that's kind of where we're at. I still struggle to understand why this has to go on.
Well, Rebecca told us earlier, but for next week, how that can take up that much time.
I cannot imagine. I imagine there will be many times when I will look at my legal guest and be saying the same thing I've said to you. I know you folks really, I know y'all want Cody back every day. And because y'all have been saying that in the chat. And I like Cody too. He's been great. He does have a real job. And the only thing our legal guests get is lunch. That's it. He got Jimmy John's. So we're this is not, so all the legal guests that come on here, they do this because I guess you're trial junkies like I am.
Yes.
And so
I do like Jimmy John's.
And you do like Jimmy John's. Yeah. But no, really. But he has agreed. I do have some good news. For closings, which is scheduled for May 5th, we will have Cody Skipper and Terry Bentley Hill in the house. It's going to be, I think it's going to be really, really good. I'm actually looking forward to that. It's going to be great to have two guests beside me. We will just, we'll be able to really parse through those closing statements. I mean, the closing arguments. It's going to be really, really good. I know it seems like I'm wrapping up, but I'm really not just yet, because I'm pretty sure Rebecca's going to call in. So we're going to chat for a few more minutes until we get Rebecca on the line. One of the things I know is you went back and you looked at Jason Trahan's live blog, because you had not, like a lot of people, you got a real job. You couldn't watch this whole trial from beginning to end.
Right.
But you went back and you looked at Jason's blog on this. It's just a very good summation of this case. And again, when you look at that, when you read through that, let's talk about, again, I know we did a little bit earlier, but folks are, different people hop in and out. Walk me through what you think are the key things in this case.
Is what the jurors had to listen to on the audio and the video. It was a calculated decision, a calculated crime. He's on these very rural routes, obviously. And just the severity of the crime itself, and then always looks at the DNA and the medical examiner's findings. The DNA, you'll recall that the defense tried to make hay about, well, you can't state with any scientific certainty that she hadn't been sexually assaulted, and of course the ME, as she should have, because she's very experienced in doing this, responding back, well, that doesn't mean that she wasn't.
Right.
There's nothing conclusive that she wasn't, just because if the hymen doesn't have.
Where else does it come from?
Anything. I mean, you could have digital penetration. I mean, any lawyer knows that. Damage there, and again, where the defense is in that position where there's DNA of his on a 7-year-old little girl's body in places that it should not be. It's not anyone else's.
That's right.
It's his, and there's semen in his.
It's painful.
It's painful. It's private. However, that just jumps out at me. The judge has been very gracious, and number one, who's qualified as an expert. Seems like everyone has been from the defense side. What they say, what opinions they give, even if it's outside of their wheelhouse, because these cases, as you know, are subject to increased scrutiny because you're dealing with the death penalty.
Right.
But I would say you're talking about the main point here, the DNA, and good investigators learned this. They were very good about this when they kept coming back to him because they had the video. Then he lied initially about the green van, then he lied about the site, and then he lied about killing her with the van first before he loaded her in. So thankfully they had all that information ahead of time, and they could apply leverage points to extract and ultimately where she was.
And that guy who with that company, that he had gone difficulty of downloading that stuff.
That is significant. Thankfully the company expedited that, where they could obtain it, number one, and then get that quickly, because like we were asking earlier, between the two of us, if this happened 20 years ago without GPS tracking on a country road, much like Amber Hagerman. This case still unsolved. Namesake for the Amber Alerts. Actually, had her stepfather. He was a victim of mine. I prosecuted a case where we talked a lot about his daughter, and he brought me an old missing persons poster, one of the originals of Amber. It actually hangs. But there are so many similarities to that case factually, but they just didn't have what we have today. We didn't have that tracking, GPS, video recordings, and thankfully these guys, the law enforcement, they worked quickly and they obtained this information, and they were able to get him in. But there was that downtime, like you said, between Wednesday, November the 30th, and Friday, December the 2nd. And there's a lot of people that I think want to know what he was doing.
Yeah.
Other than donning his FedEx uniform and driving the next day through a barricade, complaining to the very cops who were looking for this little girl, smoking a cigarette. I mean, so just, it's hard for me to say 5 things. That's my answer.
I know.
There's a lot of things here. This guy's buried under a mountain of evidence that he cannot escape from.
Yeah, it's not one thing. It's all the things. It's everything you have in this case. It is. And by the way, folks, Rebecca will be joining us here in a few minutes. She's on. There she is. Okay, Rebecca,
I'm here.
We've been waiting on you. So, Cody and I were just continuing to talk about what we just saw.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, another expert witness that didn't even examine Tanner Horner, just speaking generically about the brain. And so, but again, I just think that the defense is trying to get to that mitigating. For the jury to answer that one question: are there mitigating circumstances that would prohibit you from giving him the death penalty? And continuing to say that his brain shows signs that he is autistic, diagnosed according to the family and some of the teachers when he was younger. And so I don't know why we haven't heard from that particular expert, but all these other experts that are looking at brain scans years later of Horner. So I guess that's the biggest question I have. But also the prosecution is going to also have to show that the first question that the jury's going to have to answer: does he continue to pose a threat? And he has been here at the Tarrant County Jail, and he's had no problems at all. He has not been violent. There have been no issues with him inside the jail. So the defense is going to try to show, well, look, if you put him in a controlled environment, which is a jail or prison, and he may not pose a threat to society, which would be basically within the TDCJ. And because he's had this somewhat clean record, no criminal history in his past, that with its witnesses.
You say not.
Well, that's the issue. We're both going to come in and close that gap. I have no doubt about that. I mean, you can't, just because he has no criminal history doesn't mean he hasn't done something before.
Right.
He has been caught. And obviously, when he's asked in the interrogation room, he's going to say no. And let's say that's true. I mean, that can actually be true. It does not negate the fact that he's not a future threat. You can't, I mean, the defense is going to make this argument that there's got to be data to measure. There's a prison population. They're going to be confined, controlled, and that's just not the way it's going to shake out. Even if it's a prison population, someone with this type of behavior and conduct, and the post-act obstruction and cover-up and lies and manipulation, guards, inmates, staff.
There's people that come into those prisons to do stuff.
I mean, there will be a person to generally say what all these other people have said without really diving into the details of this defendant, and it'll be up to the jury whether they think that's enough or not. Or compare other people that, I mean, you've got habitual drug offenders now doing a life sentence. I mean, just let's just call it what it is.
Right.
I mean, drugs. There are so many less level offenses where people have got dinged, right? And I understand this is life without parole, but when it comes down to the rubber meeting the road, it's really, okay, are we going to drop to that level because the kid swallowed some pennies, his mother's a stripper, smoked some dope, and he has autism? I would think no.
Right. Yeah, Rebecca.
And Tanya. Well, again, having sat through that 1 hour audio and also being in there with Athena's mom testifying, I think that jury was very rattled and very shaken up and very emotional, openly sobbing. And I just think, even though you've got all of the defense trying to, prove that there are mitigating circumstances and that he doesn't pose, it is hard for this defense to overcome the emotion in the courtroom. The jury, they're humans, and even though during voir dire, when they were individually questioning them, can you look at the evidence? Can you follow the law? Can you answer these questions honestly? I don't know that anybody expected that audio to be as big as it was. I this vision of what it might be, but when I actually sat through that, it was far worse than anything that you can imagine in your mind, Tanya. And I just don't know how you overcome that as a defense. I just don't.
Cody, can you ever create enough space between that kind of audio?
I never say never, but this is a a long shot. I mean, they're trying to create as much space as possible. How in the world they're going to fill four more days of this? That space, and the state's doing a good job. These are very precise, succinct surgical examinations, 4 or 5 questions tops, because I know what the answer is. You're going to repeat it. They're going to repeat it, and again, wash, rinse, repeat, and then when that rebuttal, that's why they call it rebuttal. It's a counterpunch. It's going to hit like Mike Tyson. I mean, it's going to knock them out. So they do that, and then move on to closing argument.
Yeah.
And Tanya, I did get to hear one of the rebuttal witnesses, and he sounds very credible. He talks about, look, I looked at all the same CAT scans and all of the same reports and things in his past the defense has not brought up, where he has had other things in his past where it comes to his sexuality and his and how he conducts himself with his partners and around other people. So they're probably expect to hear a little bit more of that, of his sexual deviance.
Okay. Well, we haven't met him. Haven't
Correct.
examined him. I find
You
that
will
stunning.
hear some. Yeah, you will hear a couple of witnesses that are going to say that. Witness for the defense, basically, along with possibly one of his relatives, come up here and talk about what he was like as a kid, and that they're shocked what he did, and his grandma and his mom, where you hear him to explain his actions. So you're probably going to hear a little bit more of that in the coming days.
Rebecca, what are we expecting? And so we're expecting. Do we have a sense on how things are going to go for the rest of the trial?
Well, I think that we're going to hear more of the defense witnesses, obviously more experts. I think there's like 4 or 5 more. And then in between, we're going to hear more character witnesses, that of Tanner Horner, or people that can talk about his background, brother, for example. And then I feel like this is all going to wrap up Thursday. But Monday, we're expecting to probably hear from the rebuttal witnesses.
Well, I've got Cody, so I've got.
Okay, yeah.
I think both of them will, kind of fiery. So I think between the two of them, it'll be great. So,
I can't really even speak to defense attorney. I didn't imagine that it was going to be what it was. And I can only, feel for Athena's family. They were not in there. They did not hear it. They chose not. And I'm sure that is obviously going to be very front and center for the prosecution in their closing arguments. And we may even hear a snippet of it. I'm not sure how they're going to do that, if they do, because the court has asked that we not air any of that. And in fact, the judge has sealed that videotape. It will never see the light of day. It is forever sealed. It will not be released. So if they do decide to play closing, I'm not sure how they're going to do that, or they're just going to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's much more effective too to just have it as a transcript and then read the snippet fellow myself, and I appreciate what you do, and
Thank you.
it's important that the public stays informed. You've got to bring these cases because, as you know, if the public doesn't see them, they don't realize that
Right.
there's that level of evil walking amongst us, or driving into your driveway every afternoon while your kids playing basketball to deliver a package. And I mean that. That's
No,
not,
I'm with
I
you.
mean, you can tell your kids to be vigilant and enjoy being out in the country and being outside and doing all the things that they should be doing. But there's just some things that are outside of everyone's control. And just go home and hug your kids and give them a kiss. And, read them a nice story, ask them about their day, take them camping, fishing, play sports, be engaged with them. Nothing that these guys probably aren't already doing, but can happen. Teaching your kids and making sure they know to be vigilant, even with a guy with a FedEx uniform. So that's really my only last thoughts on that.
Yeah, and when they say it's every parent's work. All right, folks, we're going to 8 a.m. on Monday morning as we continue trial for Athena Strand and see what the jury decides with Tanner Horner. Thank you for joining us.